Dun, 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 dun.
All right, here's the deal. We're all stuck in a time loop of some kind. However, Teal'c and I seem to be the only ones who realize it. Now, there's this alien device on 639. It shoots a beam at the Stargate, which, or subspace, something, what? Access to subspace fuel the Stargate is capable of generating. It's powered by ionization in the atmosphere, right, which is caused by, I know this one, magnets. The geomagnetic storm. Of course. Anyway, I don't know why none of you remember this, but I do know for a fact there's no point in having old Doc Fraser examining us again.
One short of a happy meal. Wacko!
Yeah.
I was thinking of that scene too.
So
yeah, if you haven't guessed from the theme song and what my friend here was talking about, and of course the title of this video, we are talking about the Stargate franchise.
yes.
Well, I wanted to get Matt, Todd from the Scoundrels Cantina, and Tim from Open Airlock Policy on here to talk with us, but they're just too busy, so I improvised.
Got people from the server where I'm doing my big epic multi-franchise sci-fi crossover. You've been wanting to get into Stargate for a long time, but it wasn't until like I took you through it that you saw the whole thing. It took a year.
Yep.
Everyone introduced yourself. Edward, G-Man.
Okay, I guess I'm going first.
Yeah, you proceed.
Okay, I'm G-Man. I'll probably leave it at that. I'm mid-20s. I'm an engineering student at my local state university, electrical engineering. What do I do Stargate related anymore? I help admin in a Stargate RP server for a friend of mine. I'm mostly the guy who sits there and fixes things and figures out what actually should work, mostly in regards to a lot of space combat movement. Because, galaxies are big and ships are very inconsistent in Stargate and how fast they go, especially the gold.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Edward. I'm 23. I am a political science student, so I've always found Stargate really interesting because, when I was a kid growing up with it, I was always very intrigued by the world building that always came from it. And I've recently have been more focused on Star Wars and Star Trek, just because Stargate didn't really continue on after the end of SG-1 and Universe, Atlantis. And so somewhat recently, a few months, G-Man introduced me to his community that was doing more Stargate stuff, which was very fascinating because I just didn't really ever encounter much Stargate activity with fan groups outside of conventions and other stuff when I used to live in Chicago, and there used to be a yearly convention there. And so I was just very intrigued by the wanting to discuss different aspects of Stargate lore and parts of the world building that we found interesting.
Well, can I go next?
Oh, sure.
With me, it's that, well, I don't know. There's not much to say about me personally. I'm 34. I'm just an old type fan. But for me, what Stargate represents is, for years, I've been watching SF Debris reviews and other reviews. And I heard various things about Stargate. I'd seen the movie in the 90s when I was like a kid, but never really absorbed into this bigger universe until late 2019. I've said this before. For me, what it was about Stargate is that I felt like Star Trek and Star Wars had moved on from me in terms of the management and what they were doing and just everything that was going on. And I got tired of it. So I'd already seen Babylon 5 and gotten to Stargate, and those two shows kind of rekindled all the feelings I'd lost in Star Wars and Star Trek, and it was a trip. And once I saw it, I knew when I met Iron that he had to see it. It was great.
Oh yes. What else do I have to say about that?
Well, it said it took us a year.
Yeah, but I knew Stargate existed for years. In fact, I remember, Grandpa would watch Stargate on TV, and I do remember a little bit. Like I remember seeing Teal'c, the Stargates, a bunch of action going on.
Kayla.
Oh yeah, and I also even remember him watching Atlantis too.
Yeah.
And I remember Elizabeth Weir,
Yeah.
Which actress or
the original, because this would have been kind of like
as in the one that lasted all
2000s.
2 episodes?
Oh what?
As in the one that lasted 2 episodes?
No. This was the mid 2000s. So this would have been the
You
original
didn't
Weir.
get the joke.
Yeah.
Weir's played by 3 different actresses.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And in fairness, the last one of those is like a replicator android body.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, what else? And I do remember my dad watching the Stargate movie, and he was like, "Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of corny." And
What?
it kind of gave me sort of a slightly less positive opinion about if I was going to go into it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give it a chance for years, and I'm here at my grandma's hiding away from the rest of the world, and it was like March 16th, right? We started watching SG-1.
It was March, yes, and it
Yes.
lasted until April of this year.
And what's funny is I did not watch the movie first. I watched SG-1 before watching the movie.
That's fair.
For me, as a kid, what was it about the movie was the most impressive thing to me was it had French Stewart, a.k.a. that guy who voiced Icarus on the Hercules cartoon and also was one of the aliens on Third Rock. So it didn't stand out much to me as much as a series.
So yeah, should we go on to the movie itself?
Watch, I'm curious, how did you two meet?
What?
How did you two meet?
He just like commented on my
Videos.
channel, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, you want to talk or whatever?" And so I sent him my Discord tag, and we've been friends ever since.
We're old Star Wars EU fans, basically.
That's fair. All right.
Yeah, and
Edward and I are neighbors. We live about 10 minutes apart from each other.
But we didn't know that for after
It
a
took
year.
us about a year to figure that one out.
Yeah.
I think okay, he mentioned
I mentioned passing by the Rima church during.
Yeah, he mentioned passing by a local church that I recognize as the biggest church in the city. I happened to mention the local high school that I live next to that he went to. Mind you, Edward and I are only a month apart. We're the same age.
Ooh.
Wow.
And
there's 10 years separating Iron and me.
Yeah, no, Edward. I'm older than Edward by about a month. There's not much of a difference here. Yeah, we live in the same city.
And it turns out we share a lot of similar interests in many different sci-fi universes.
Yes.
And we've discussed a lot of them in length because of a lot of math games and RPs that we all participate in.
Wow.
Sounds as if you two have been into Stargate far longer than me and Sean would.
So I watched the movie. My family owned the movie probably about the time I was born, or before. I saw that movie 20, 30 times growing up. I did not see SG-1 until I was perhaps 7. I probably saw the pilot episode of SG-1 about the same time the series finale ended. I basically saw SG-1 as the show ended. Is when I started. That's about the time we got Netflix. This is back when Netflix, was all the DVDs and everything. Went through SG-1, went through Atlantis. I watched SGU, generally speaking, as it came out. That was the one show I got to watch as it came out. I saw all the movies. The only one I haven't seen is Origin, the little web series. But
no, I haven't seen that either.
I know the general idea of what happened. I just don't know all the tiny details.
Yeah.
I got into Stargate in 2011, and I only know that very specifically just because some other stuff in my life that happened at the same time. Because what happened is I forget exactly why. I'm pretty sure I was pouting because I got into an argument with my parents, and so I went in. So I was just kind of sitting in their room watching TV, and I pulled up the Sci-Fi Channel, and I watched the second half of the arc when Apophis attacks Earth for the first time, and
Oh,
back when hot talks were all so rare. But and I remember I watched the second half, and I was like, "What is this show?" And so then every Sunday I would spend my time watching it. But what was crazy was a month later, during Christmas, we went to my local Sam's, and they had this huge collection set of all 10 seasons of SG-1, along with this fancy Stargate model that has a Stargate attached to the front of it. And so, well, he bought me the entire series, and as my birthday / Christmas present, because my birthday is right next to Christmas, and so I just I binge watched the entire series in my entire winter break. I stayed up so late, and so I kept I finished that up, and then I found out that they hosted a yearly Stargate convention the next year, so I got to go meet Joe Flanagan.
Of which he has a signed autograph of.
I have a lot of signed autographs. Because I met I have a picture with Ben Browder, Mitchell, David Hewitt. I was such an annoying kid because in order to get my signature with David Hewitt, I had to wait till 11 o'clock because that's when because I forget exactly why, but he was the last person to sign. So by the time we got to him, I was really annoyed that I had to be there for so long. So I complained to him.
He looks so annoyed.
And so, but then I say something to my dad's so embarrassed. And so David Hewitt writes on my thing, he says, "Charlie, it sucks to be us." I was like, oh God, what did I do? I walked away. I was like, I just complained to David Hewitt.
What's bad is you look at the picture. I've seen his pictures. You look at his picture. He doesn't look happy in the picture, and it's hilarious.
I also have a picture with Joe Flanagan and a signature from him. I met Teal'c too. He was there as well.
Basically, it's I went to Disney World and a fly landed in my ice cream.
Yeah, I was just annoyed. Well, because we got up at 6 a.m. so we'd be there for the first event, and so and I was still there at 11, and I was just a little unhappy. Yeah, Michael Shanks too, and Paul McGillen, and so I got to meet all these people, and I saw Samantha Carter and Richard Dean Anderson speak, but I was given a very strict budget. I was given an exact amount of money that I could spend on signatures and other stuff like that, and so I prioritized.
I love how you address everyone by their actors, and then you say Samantha Carter instead of Amanda Tapping.
I've seen her in too many other shows to just call her by her actress name. Because I've seen her in other shows and I'm always like, hey, look, it's Samantha Carter.
Isn't she in Homeland?
Yeah, she's in a few shows I've seen her about. But yeah, and so that's how I got into it, and I just but then I after I finished Atlantis and other stuff like that, and I eventually kind of stopped really focusing on Stargate as much just because my friend group got into Star Wars a lot, and so I kind of stopped with Stargate because I didn't really know anyone else who knew the show, or Babylon 5 for that matter, at the same time.
So I guess it's a good thing then.
How tall is Christopher Judge?
Towered over 12-year-old me.
Well, he towers over everyone in the show except for Ronan.
Oh yes.
And RDJ isn't short. I think RDJ is what? Not RDJ. RDA. Hello.
Christopher Judge is 6'3".
Oh. Okay. RDA is not that tall then, because he only goes to Christopher Judge's nose.
And Jason Momoa is 6'4".
Yeah, who doesn't know Jason Momoa at this point?
Yeah, I know how tall he is. I've seen him by accident.
Oh, another thing I forgot to mention is I remember in I've started getting Star Wars Insider since 2007, and they would advertise the Stargate magazine, and I would see the characters on there, and that kind of got me interested and curious about the franchise too, even back in kind of like the late 2000s. Because I was like, this show looks like SG-1 and Atlantis look just so interesting to me.
Yeah, it makes me kind of upset that I missed the big hype bandwagon that it had going because it did.
Yeah.
The hype. I know the one I felt, as I said earlier, was SGU. SGU was such a different show. It had such a hype to it because you had Lance, but Lance, like, yeah, you had the second city, but it was a relatively new city that had been hyped up back in SG1. You hit SGU, you hit Destiny, and the only thing we know from the trailers, this thing is way far away, and this thing is old. This thing is
Yeah.
ancient.
Well, let's
Even
talk
to the
about
ancients,
that
it is ancient.
later.
Yeah,
And it's like,
so
oh
should
my
we?
word. Oh yeah, I just think that the hype train for SGU felt.
Yeah.
I felt
should-
that one watching it. That was great.
So should we perhaps go to the movie because we were going to talk about this?
Yeah. Let's go on to the movie.
The movie, which started everything, and totally is not half of it getting retconned in the first episode.
Well, they didn't retcon that much. I think they kept the overall sense of it. They retconned Abydos and they retconned Ra's dying species, but you're supposed
Yeah,
to.
because they retconned that into being an Asgard.
Yeah,
But the movie makes it seem like, oh, that's the parasite itself.
yeah, I know. No, they retcon.
I think
we
the
can get into the retcons when we get to SG1. Okay.
Yeah, I will say, like,
your point, that's not retcons.
the movie sets up a lot of what we think of as Stargate. Like, it sets up like the awe of it, the idea of traveling, and eventually like the future goal threat. I think the one thing we always kind of have to look at it as is like it was designed as a movie first, because that's what it was. And so, like, especially like in the era that it was developed in, as similar to a lot of sci-fi in that era, there was always this certain like need to like explore new concepts but also, how do I word this? Like, the development allowed for a lot of stuff to happen later. It's just that you can tell that they wanted to really focus on this one story and they wanted to kind of figure it out.
Yeah,
They left it finished but open ended.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
about
because originally they, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin did intend this to be a trilogy, but then they sold the rights to MGM, and
I'm
we don't
happy.
know what happened from that.
I'm happy that they made Independence Day. I prefer the Stargate series and Independence Day.
I don't know. Of the two movies, if you talk about what comes after, yes, I prefer Stargate more. Just talk about the movies themselves. I've watched ID4 way more than I've watched the Stargate movie.
Yeah, well, the problem is just like it is its own thing, but I mean, like, the Stargate movie never felt like, to me, a movie I would like kind of just watch over and over again. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy it that much to be like, oh, I want to see this story again. When it's just like, it kind of, a lot of what makes that story interesting is like this. When you're first watching, is like this idea that there's this huge galactic universe, like there's so much, and you don't, and like originally they're like, oh, we're traveling galaxies away, it's so far away, Abydos.
Yeah.
And the idea is like there's so much in this galaxy to be able to explore, but like they kind of happened upon this one world, and it's just like it's kind of like this interesting awe to it, and also to meet the people of Abydos.
Yeah,
but it just kind of, once that like awe is gone, the movie loses a lot of what makes it interesting to watch the first time.
The burnout factor feels way faster.
And it plus Independence Day reused a lot of the concepts of Stargate, like secret government lab, nuclear device at the end as the game changer, and basically the roles of Jack and Daniel to much better effect, I think. They reused them, reshuffled them, and made them more memorable, I guess.
Yeah, but that also just comes with filming. As you do your trade, you get better at it. ID4 is the later film. Presumably, they would have gotten better at their jobs.
Yeah. Well, presumably, have you seen The Day After Tomorrow or 2012?
Okay, I actually like Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
2012. That movie was a nightmare of my childhood. I actually liked it.
There is something I'd like to bring up about the movie, which I think is kind of ironic in how people call movies lowbrow trash. And this is something they did better than the series, ironically, which is the idea of foreign languages and how they evolve and change over time. And often on a show like Star Trek, do you see them the aliens are all talking English? They say it's the universal translator, but in a lot of cases, seems like after the fact retconning.
Yeah.
But with Stargate, they have this language that's changed, and they actually went to real scientists for this, real Egyptologists, which
and that's kind of stuff that is I find quite delicious.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
like how Daniel calls Budge a hack. Apparently, he is.
So yeah, like I said, I watched SG-1 first, and then the movie later. Like we watched it a few months ago, and overall, I thought it was a really, just fun sci-fi action adventure flick.
Yeah, I
actually do want to watch it again, sometime in the future.
I'm actually curious, Edward. You saw the movie first, right?
No, I did not. I said my first experience in the SG, Stargate universe.
Am I the only one who watched the movie first?
Well, I watched the movie first too, mind you, because I like being thorough.
Okay, yeah. So 2 of us have seen the movie first, and then 2 of us have seen the series first, and then backtrack to the movie. Okay, I feel like depending what order you watch them in, even just like a little bit, really changes the experience. Because I know, like for myself, you watch the movie and they change it to the show. They change a lot of stuff. The staff focus are way weaker. They drop the scale significantly. Jaffa are just not a thing in the movie. And the language stuff does get dropped very quickly in the TV show. But that's not, besides the language thing, it's not too jarring. Yeah. I'm curious though, from the show aspect for you two, Iro and Edward, watching that and then going through the movie. How jarring would that have been? You're seeing staff weapons that are throwing 5 people instead of barely hurting 1. You're seeing very much these foreign languages, which you don't see past like the first 4 or 5 episodes of the show. You're seeing a lot of other things that really get magnified in the movie because they have the ability to, that the show tones down because it's not practical for a show.
Well, almost tones down. Look what they did with Xiaorei's character.
I will say personally, from like watching the show, going to the movies, I will say there was always this weird, like, I don't know, like I always kind of viewed it as just like this, like the show is its own continuation. I kind of viewed it like as a reverse Star Trek because, like, the motion picture came after like all the other stuff, and like just seeing, because I watched the original series first, then I watched the motion pictures. I was always like, it has that kind of similar vibe in my opinion, where it's just like you have these things where you see different things, and you kind of just have to accept the fact that they're different just because the mediums were changed. I don't know. I feel like I was a bit like too advanced when I first watched my sci-fi, just because my family, my dad specifically, said, I don't want you watching as the Family Guy joke, like all you see on TV nowadays is, violence in movies and sex on TV. And so what my dad was, he was just like, well, I'm going to make you watch Star Trek instead. And so he bought me all the Star Treks and was just like, you should watch this. And I enjoyed it. And so like I kind of like grew up with a far more advanced understanding.
I wonder if what he thinks of Star Trek now, that's what Star Trek.
Oh, he does not like it. Anyway, but the thing is, it's like, so I kind of like entered the Stargate universe without understanding that things just change based on mediums for Star Trek as well. So it wasn't that jarring per se, but it was definitely like, that's different. I always kind of just defaulted to the show because the show had a far more long-term thing.
Because as one example, what is it that Jack says through the series? That's Jack O'Neill, 2 L's, because in the movie it's 1.
Yes.
And while James Spader, I think James Spader did a wonderful job, and Michael Shanks carried over that spirit and ran with it superbly. But when you look at how Jack changes, it's clear that they went through an acting shift. So I do agree you got to accept some things.
Yeah, because from what I've heard, Richard Dean Anderson did not want to be the super serious military guy. He wanted to have humor and be sarcastic,
which is why
I'm really glad they did that.
I can confirm this. He actually Michael Shanks actually did very much kind of stuck to the whole spirit of things. In fact, the original actor for Jack from the movie, when he drops by the set at one point, actually very much remarked that you fit it very well. RJ, on the other hand, when he came on, specifically practically demanded to change the character to be a lot more lighthearted.
Yeah, well, but they did work with that. I feel like for people who say it's not a smooth transition, it isn't, because like the actors change, but
Yes, so
I think they went with it the best they could, because it's set a year later, and how Jack feels in the pilot when he's Richard D. Anderson feels like a characterization that could have come from Kurt Russell if he had actually signed on, but he wasn't going to because
I-
it was too expensive.
I will
Yeah.
say, as a kid, when I first watched that, like, just like I knew that there was an actor change. I was like, yeah, they're different people. I don't know. To me, how I just interpreted it with my kid mind was just the fact, like, the Jack O'Neill in the movie was so serious because, like, like the death of his kid was so recent. And like the Jack O'Neill of SG1 was always like, I wanted to retire, I'm just so sick of everything and I don't care anymore. And I will just say from like my own experiences with retired people, retirement does do that thing where it's just like, I don't have to be uptight anymore. And plus also, he's had time to kind of like recover a bit from his trauma with his child, like, Charlie. My name is Charles, so I always find that funny. But like, I feel like he's using, like, I always kind of just assumed it was kind of like he's using humor to cover up his pain, which happens a lot
that makes
in
so
real
much
life.
sense.
Because like that's what literally happens a lot in real life. Is like the most happy-go-lucky people are some of the most suffering people on the inside, and we've seen like glimpses through the show of that. Where it's
there is something I'd like to say. I feel like the Stargate program also reactivates a part of him that even when he wasn't like depressed and cynical and whatever, had long been buried. Because when you look at when he's looking at the two moons in the sky, it's Kurt Russell's face really sells it. Like the fact that I'm on another world and just the awe and wonder. I think they kept with that.
Yeah. What do you guys think of the general plotline of the movie? Because you had your bit in your '90s cheese one-off thing. It was a bunch of cheese stuff. I thought Raw, and I forget who played Raw. I don't think I ever saw the actor again. I thought the actor who played Raw did really well. That very nice regal appearance.
Yes,
I am Raw.
The long hair, the outfit.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. From the EU material, we know he kept order for 20,000 years. That's the age of the Old Republic in the Star Wars Legends EU.
Mm-hmm.
And his voice was like really creepy and intimidating.
There is a certain thing about like the Raw persona, especially like I do like how the show kind of emphasizes that the people who took over after Raw were not the same as Raw. I mean, like Apophis, like he acts like the jilted brother who's always been his brother's shadow. So now that he's in charge, he's like, and then you just see like the other people kind of just like flourished in his reign. And I kind of like how like this show does a really good, like the future show does talk about that. But like you could imagine the Raw from the movie like ruling over all these people, and like it's part of the reason why he's kind of like he's both curious about like these new humans. He's like, I remember you, because like he even says it. It's just like I wasn't your planet, and it changed how we all functioned and stuff like that. I will say the one thing though is like I think he really set up the future Goa'uld, but at the same time I feel like he got to how do I word this? He did a great job with just like setting up what we'd eventually think of the Goa'uld, but you can definitely tell that some changes happened later on just because of how the show went. But I really like that like idea of this supreme overlord character that he acts really well. And the fact he has to wear that insane headset when he first walks in with like the helmet thing is like
well, so that's something again that was in the movie that the show for obvious budget reasons has to simplify to just like the serpent piece or the horse piece just breaking apart. Is that full? I feel the Goa'uld tech in that one is a bit more in the whole elegance of knife magic. The whole headpiece that folds into, I'm presuming, where the headband's holding his ponytail up, and like the Jafar pieces with the jackal head, who is really funny enough. His first prime is called Anubis. That is the canonical name for that first prime.
Yeah, that's true.
And then all the other ones who have Horus Guard helmets, which we do see those again in the show, and how those pieces just fold in to, I guess, part of the neck guard. They just kind of fade out. It's like, oh my word, that is awesome. And we never see it again. Even with the ones who work with Hair who should have the exact same helmet, we see them break, like the Serpent Guard.
They didn't break with
Yeah.
horror, but they did during Mobius when they went back in time. But that's for the show.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because I'm a huge when I was a kid, I was a huge Egyptologist. I was I like to really studying that. And so what I don't know, I was nerding out as a kid because I was just he has serpent, his guards, they're not later on for Apophis, I found that interesting. But I was he has the Horus guard. I was yeah, because Horus is literally this. It was kind of cool. Though I was always kind of I was kind of sad there was no Osiris because it kind of skipped a generation of Egyptian gods. But there was this cool aspect because Horus is literally the grandson of Ra and stuff like that.
You're to
And,
Egypt. Have you ever played Pharaoh? That old PC game?
maybe.
Yes, I have years ago. We're talking almost 2 decades ago, but yes.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It's just, I will say, that's one thing that Stargate always had the advantage of is it has this huge Earth mythology to always have new characters to draw upon and different designs. It affects everything in the show, but that's kind of going into the show itself. And so it's always kind of hard because the movie starts off these premises, but they don't get developed till later, and so you always kind of want to skip ahead.
Yeah, but I think, my thing is, as an EU fan, what I like is connections and finding the way things that fit together. So watching the movie with the benefit of hindsight, for me, it's you see these, they feel exactly like the same world, even though they're supposed to be separate. I mean, one thing the show sets up later that the movie did is this idea of enhanced bombs via Naquita or even a quadrille later, and how it increases their explosive potential. And that's something that was in the show for a while. And it really started with Raw, when he took Russell's nuke and used it, basically.
Yeah, and modified it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my! You know what? Another amazing thing about the movie is.
The cats.
Oh, the cats are really good, but the music.
Yes.
Doesn't it sort of have it? Even though it wasn't done by John Williams, does it sort of have that kind of vibe?
Kind of, yeah.
Something you hear Indiana Jones, Star Wars, or
I mean,
E.T.
I think it's kind of, it was the era of movies. Is you need very dramatic music as a part of that was just kind of the era at the time.
Yeah. Didn't the guy who made the Stargate music do the same one for Independence Day? He's very memorable.
I wouldn't be surprised if you talk about the movies. A lot of directors tend to use the same music person. That's pretty common in the industry.
David Arnold, that's the guy's name.
Yes, you're right. I knew there was an Arnold in it.
Yeah.
I will say, in the end, one thing that always was really interesting to me about the movie, though, is it's just also just the fact that we got it's kind of grating when you watch the movie after you've watched the show, but the communication barriers is kind of when they first meet the Abadonians and they're just trying to talk to them, and it's just, it's so complicated. And then especially if you watch the show where you literally just talk to the Abadonians, it's just
Bobby Way.
Yeah, and it's just
at least that one is explained as, Daniel slowly taught them all. Cool. Yeah, but once you get past episode 5 in the show, everyone speaks English.
Yeah. Okay.
We have the whole British meme of everyone wondering why do they always speak English in all the movies, and you get the whole little British boat into space claim planet going, you speak English now.
Let's just never forget that they even made fun of it in the Wormhole Extreme episode where the producer is just well, they all speak English, but we don't explain that, and they're just
this reminds me of something that happened on Star Trek that is similar to the Stargate thing, which is the spacesuit in the movie didn't have a self-sealing function, but on Enterprise it did. But you can't begrudge that as a retcon because that's the way it's supposed to be. It's a better function. And the same thing, I think, applies here to how presented in the movie is how it actually is. So it's you can't hold... But at the same time, it's a sense of expediency. So it's you can't hold it against the show that much, but it is jarring, as you say.
Well, yeah, it's because I think moving on to the show a bit, you have to cut it because the couple episodes they do show it, which I believe is the Native American one, and a couple others.
Spirits.
Spirits, and I think they show 1 or 2 others. You're spending 10 minutes, which is almost a quarter of the episode, just trying to figure out how to say, hi, who are you? Spending a quarter of the episode, every episode, just trying to figure out, I don't know, who are you even talking to? It kind of gets tedious.
Well, I mean, it's just unfortunate. It's just the reality of the genre. You can't realistically do it, so you just kind of brush it aside. We could always just jokingly say that the Ascended, just taught everyone English for some reason. I don't know.
It's like,
I think
it's
that's
why.
when I think that's when they go with the translator microbes in the Stargate that get into your brain, which is it fixes it, but in a kind of messy way. It does
Yeah.
work, but
At that point, you're starting to pull into the whole Doctor Who gimmick of, oh, how can when you go to all these worlds, you can always understand the language and read everything? It's because when you travel in the TARDIS long enough, it just kind of it's explained basically it
it's like a
ingrains
mental
it in
link.
your head.
It's a mental link between the TARDIS, because like they say, if the TARDIS got disabled, you wouldn't be able to hear, you wouldn't be able to understand, and if you spend enough time with the TARDIS, it'll keep that mental link, but at the same time, it's like it's functional on the TARDIS, which makes it at least it works somewhat, because it means that yes, an ancient piece of like this technology that's super advanced is helping you. Stargate just can't do that, because in the end, it literally would mean that every episode would have to spend way too much time, and so I'm just kind of happy
I've found people who have laissez-faire creativity who just say, well, you can't box me down that way. I think working within restrictions enhances creativity, but then there's some things you're asking for that are way too much.
No, I get the prepper's missed out. I totally get it. As I said, you're spending a quarter episode just trying to figure out say hi is annoying.
Yeah,
But it's like it fits within the gold. Because I remember someone did a video a while back. Space Doc did a video on this of how to rule an empire, and it was comparing the Galactic Empire from Star Wars with the Goa'uld. It's like, yeah, what Palpatine tries to do, and the Republic is only 20 years ago. You have an educated population. You have a population that knows the Republic. Of course, they threw a fit when you did all your dark shenanigans. But the Goa'uld, though, the human slaves, they're not allowed to read. They're not allowed to do basically anything. They're only allowed to do what they're told. Even the Jaffa, who have freedoms, who can read and write, are very restricted. So, of course, they last for all these time because they kept the population low. And it mentions the moment the population gains knowledge, the moment any real resistance shows up, they lost. They lost fast. You talk about a 20,000-year-old empire that dies in 8 years. That's a blink of an eye to a Goa'uld.
Well, I mean, just to kind of point out, I think it's one of those really good examples of like compared to IRL, like the aftermath of the Black Death really changed like the worth value of like labor, because of the Black Death, labor became so important that it creates the future like long-term thing where it's just like they demand more rights, they demand more money, they actually have more power to say no, because back in the day they just say, you won't do it, I'll just have this other slave do it and kill you. It's just like you don't get to rise up because you aren't intelligent enough to do it. And that's why the Goa'uld, they just die so quickly, which is kind of funny because like the fact is like the Goa'uld were rising during the downfall of the ancients, and so it's kind of interesting that they fall to like a different form of problem, and they keep their empire alive by keeping everyone down, but at the same time it's kind of like you rule over, I don't know like how to word this, but like you keep your population primitive so you can rule, but the thing is like the productivity of those people is never going to be the same as like an industrialized one, which is why I always found it interesting later on anyways of like how they discuss that, but that's more in the show rather than the movie.
Something else about the language thing is I just like it when they do at least minor nods to it. Like even in late season 1, when the Teal'c is on trial, they're like, do these people speak English? And yeah, they understand it, but at least they like nod to it. There's an episode in Late Atlantis where they're late SQ1, sorry, where I got confused, where they're trying to get information from the Atlantis computers, and Daniel talks about how languages change over time, how Moros became, was it Mirrodin and then Merlin. And so at least they're acknowledging that, even if they can't keep it consistent. I like when they at least admit it.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, Vol is just like, look up Sangrel, and it's just like, no, it's not going to be the same thing in the computer.
Missing iron.
There's this one scene from the Stargate movie that I just find myself watching on. I find someone uploaded on YouTube, and I watch it over and over and over again. It's the scene where you know, Kasuf first stands up on that sand dune, he raises his staff and declares something to, Ra, and then all the other Abadonians appear behind him, and then they charge.
Oh yeah.
Like the epic score during that is just,
Yeah.
it's so cool.
Yeah.
Which also, I feel that really goes to show how the Jaffa could have been portrayed. You look at those staff weapons, each individual shot, and they're not in their fighters anymore. They're on the ground just holding the right with staff weapons. Each shot is downing 6, 7, 8 Abadonians. You go to the show, I think we see a similar event somewhere else. Each shot was taking out maybe one person, if that.
Well, maybe you could say that, since
really shows
Ra was
your
kind of like
effect.
the head honcho, he has the most advanced tech or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because Ra in the movie seems to have he has roughly the same tech as Gold, but everything just seems to be so much more. The helmets are fancier, they can fully phase out, the weapons are just his individual staff weapons are the same power as staff cannons from the show.
I mean, you could. I mean, throughout sci-fi universes and just in real life, a lot of rulers will always keep the best stuff with them, so that it's easier to control your underlings. It would make sense, though.
Yeah.
It's probably also just like, oh, we can't. I mean, you could just say. I mean, the realities of it is probably just that's too overpowered for the show to work. But it makes sense for like a nice little like headcanon to why they're different technology levels.
And then
Can I say something?
Mm.
We've been at this for like 40 minutes, and the movie's good, but I feel like the primary purpose here is to talk about the show. So
True.
I did warn you before all of this that Edward and I can go all day.
Yeah, so should we just give some
Yeah.
final closing thoughts and then head on to SG1?
Movie good, sets up, but the thing is like because of the show Forever On, like it sets up the premise, but really the show completely changes the original things that the movie was originally telling us. I mean, that's fine. It's just that it is interesting to ground, like you look back at the movie and you see a completely different era of what the people of Stargate thought the show might have been.
My final thoughts are that you could watch the movie either way. After the fact, you just really want to get into the series and are not impatient, or if you just want to start with the first, go straight chronological, which is what I did. But I think if you watch it first, you should at least rewatch it afterwards for the new context and be like, because if you like connections like I do, you'll probably get a lot more enjoyment out of it the second time even more.
So yeah, it's a really super fun movie, as I said, but I do prefer the TV series for just how much more it expanded upon what the movie established and made things a lot clearer. Just so much world building and so much more added to the universe.
But at least the movie had the cats.
Oh yes.
G-Man?
Edward said most of what I would say. The biggest thing is the show tones down a lot of the technological splendor of the Gold.
Yeah.
But they expanded in so many other ways, which is nice.
Yeah,
Like, Daniel Jackson having a physical hole blown through him.
Yeah.
No one questions it. 5 minutes later after that scene, never mentioned again. Did he just go the rest of the movie with a massive hole size of his fist in him? Because he sticks his hand in that hole. Which really kind of goes to show the sarcophagus in the movie is so crazy. Yes, you have a hole that killed you. You're alive though. I didn't fill it in, but you're alive. Don't question it. Whereas the show sarcophagus. I healed you. The hole's gone. See, all better.
But long term, your mental state is going to become very messed up.
Yeah, Nakoda did not entirely. Actually, no, I guess Nakoda was invented in the movie. Not to the same extent in the movie though.
So, but now we come to the main meat of this. SG1. Yes, what a godly show that is.
Oh my.
Now, which rabbit hole do you want to go down first?
I don't know.
It went on for 10 years. Think about that. It went on longer just as a standalone series and not part of the spin-off series than Star Trek Next Generation did, which was kind of revolutionary for its time because TOS had only gone on for 3 years. And
I mean, the thing is like every sci-fi series has its grounding base. Star Wars has the original trilogy. Star Trek has Next Generation, that then spun off to other stuff. Babylon 5 is itself. Farscape's itself. But like the thing is like especially for universes that eventually expand into other things, they have to have their like main like anchor. And SG1, because of how long it is, it's almost like the entire universe in a way. I mean, because of just how long it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those things that's really interesting. Like, even though we had Atlantis universe and other stuff, the thing is, like, everything is so based on SG1 that completely changes over time.
It's like even though the movie came first, SG1 is like the center that holds it together because a movie's a standalone experience. You're there to be seen, maybe rewatch a bit, but then you move on. And SG1 went on, and 10 years, that's a long time. So they had spin-offs, had this stuff before, so it's kind of like the big nexus to what broke it away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's not like a lot of other shows where TNG kind of you can tell they rushed it at the end because they knew they were being canceled.
Yeah.
Now, granted, SG1 they didn't get their season 11, which they wanted to finish the Ori arc, but you got Arc of Truth, finishes that arc, and then of course you have the whole ball question. Man's still around, and you get Continuum, which is honestly probably one of my favorite movies ever. And Stargate media in general, I would probably rate Continuum as one of my top 3 things. I just love Continuum.
What I love about Continuum is Ball just calls up the president, and then it's so like him. They did it because they had a little budget, but it's just so like him. It makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Dude. Ball is best boy. Ball is the greatest character there
He
is.
He's probably my favorite system lord.
The way I should say it for the people who are following who may not see the series is it can be broken down into 3 eras, like I said. The Apophis era, the Anubis era, and then the Ori/Wraith era, basically.
Well, the Apophis one should have a hyphen of Apophis-Sokar.
Yeah.
Sokar's a big smack dab gap in the middle of Apophis.
Well, I would more kind of think of it as the era of like the system lords, in all honesty. I mean, like the thing is, like, yes, Apophis is like the main threat, especially like in the first couple seasons, but like there is a lot of interplay with a ton of other system lord characters. So I would say like the first era is definitely the system lords as a whole, rather than just Apophis, even though he's like the most visible one.
Yeah,
with the exception of what's her name? God, I forgot her name. She's so unmemorable to me.
Hathor?
Hathor, that's it. Because just the first episode, they even made fun of this in the show. They rejected Hathor, but that was gold.
Okay,
Oh
let's
my.
face
Okay,
it,
so I
all
did want to
these-
talk about, when we had reached March this year, like, March and April, since it had been like a year since we watched the first season of SG1, like, I was already feeling nostalgic for some of those early episodes. And I was thinking back to them. It's like, yeah, in the near future, I'm going to be rewatching that again. But I was just like, because early on, even though I will say, season 1 was probably the weakest, there's all that early series edginess and awkwardness that they had to kind of iron out. Like I do, there's a lot of episodes from season 1 I still remember fondly.
Yeah, for those who don't follow the series, it is mostly all ages, very accessible, except for the pilot because of what they did with Shao-Rai as a holdover from the
they
movie.
fixed that.
Yeah,
There are a lot of people don't realize there are 2 pilots. You have
basically
you have the Return. Is it Return? You
Yeah.
have Children of the Gods Part 1, Part 2.
Yeah, I'm
And
just
then they
telling
did
you.
a redo, which is the combined. It's the same length, but there's 2 big changes. The whole Shara implantation scene. One scene, they crop it for a few points.
Yeah, for
And
those
then
who may not.
the ending is the oversized glider with the ring gets changed to a Teltac, because Teltacs did not exist at the time.
Yeah, but what I'm telling people who may not know is there's a full frontal nudity scene, and that was kind of mandated by the studio for edginess reasons, but at the same time, it was edited out. That's the only part that's like really perhaps not be able to show on TV. But
I mean, it's just because like originally the show was going to be a far more adult, like it was like on like as I remember, it's just kind of like is like the show originally was going to be far more for adults
Yeah.
rather than all ages, but then it kind of like quickly like receded from that just because like the fan base that like actually were drawn to it was a far more like mixed
family audience.
Yeah, and so the original idea to kind of like market to adults completely fell on its face, so they kind of just had to change it up.
Yeah, like another
They did
thing-
keep certain things, but I mean,
yeah. Like I remember another kind of edgy thing that happened in season 1 is I remember like I think it was Sam and another character. They're like making out in an elevator.
You mean with Jack in the episode? What's it called? The Broca Divide. That's where.
Yes, I think that's what it was.
It's where they're reverting into animals.
Oh yeah, the Ooga Booga disease.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
But no, like the whole adult thing. The only other time they really get that far, besides the opening episodes, is probably the first Hathor episode, just because of who Hathor is and what that pushes. Especially since they never explicitly say the word, but Hathor and Daniel get busy.
Right.
Yeah, they did.
And look, in the Broca Divide, Daniel's like, oh, he's going to rape that woman. Who cares? It's how primitive people do it. And that's kind of blasé. That's not the Daniel we know. Early SG1 had a lot of issues with this kind of edginess. But,
I mean, I don't think like the thing is, I feel like you kind of have to like look at it from like the time period. I mean, like a lot of shows, especially ones like that were more cable centric, because I know like I originally couldn't see certain ones just because they were on like only available on cable before it all came out on DVD. But it's just like because of that like cable, they don't want to look like a kid show, and also they also kind of want to like expand it to like adults. Because I mean, like I kind of made the joke earlier about like the Family Guy quotes about they still quote it to this day, the idea that there's just a ton of sex on TV. There's always kind of like let's just like I don't know, I don't want to excuse them for it, but it's just kind of the era that it started. It was a very different era of like what TV had and did.
The thing is, what makes Hathor so terrible is it has plot holes and the motivations don't make much sense. Like this girl is clearly one of the system was a Goa Ood right off the bat, and they don't seem to really question it that much. And then I know the networks were very homophobic back then. Anything slightly gay had very tight regulations, but if Hathor's powers do work that way, why not try to seduce some women just to try and get her way so that she can do that with them?
No, they mentioned that in the episode because I've actually thought about this and realized the closest Earth ever comes to falling really is actually Hathor, and it's because and they mentioned this in the episode. Her powers, her little that little pink stuff, which I'm blanking what it's called, does not work on women. It is mentioned. Teal'c is immune because of symbiote. Okay, it is explicitly mentioned. It does not work on the females.
Yeah,
if you change that to work on the females, cool. You still can't do anything with Teal'c. That's still 300 on Teal'c. If you just remove the female officers from play by doing that, you throw mainly Carter now is working with Hathor. Hathor just wins.
Yeah,
one by one, pull everyone, and suddenly Hathor controls Earth. And Hathor now think of the rest of the show. Cool, you have the SGC and everything it does still, but now Hathor is pulling the strings. So now Hathor can use them, pick off system lords, pull up troops, pull up ships. So suddenly now you have the SGC armed with half-hacks and armed with other things because now she's pulling troops and pulling ships because she is a system lord.
I mean, the one thing to point out though is like even like Hathor herself said, and first of all, just to answer, it's Nishta. That's what you were referring to.
Thank you.
Nishta. But the other thing is just the fact, like even Hathor, like kind of says, like her plan is like, I will rebuild the Jaffa army on Earth. I know that this place isn't actually like she kind of talks about that idea.
Could Hathor, if he had done that, taken the foothold and actually gotten control of Earth, been a real threat to Anubis?
I was actually gonna speak on this one thing though. Didn't she say you have to be like in like distance, because otherwise once you are no longer under the influence, you no longer can be influenced by Nishta, and that's the whole point. Like he had to keep it going. Like even like Jack had to be hit twice with it, because remember he goes in to talk to her and he's like, and he's like, I'm not really sure about this, and so she's like, and so she Jaffas him.
That's the weird thing is Jaffa. I always took it as the Jaffa the fact that she knows Jaffa are immune to it, but she's willing to turn them into Jaffa means one of two things. Either one, the Jaffa device has a partial implementation of brainwashing, which would make a lot of sense because you're turning human slaves. These things. Oh, what Jaffa? Yeah, English. Hello. These are what originally turned slaves into Jaffa, and Jaffa are these great loyal warriors, which means there's either A, a point of brainwashing in this, or B, it stamps their DNA, which means because the Nishtaz already is in the system, doing this basically it either puts a new level of brainwashing or it makes the Nishta permanent. That's the only reason she would risk turning people to Jaffa, because otherwise, if Jack is already resistant, he turns to Jaffa, he gets a symbiote, Nishta breaks, he turns around and kills her.
Yeah, well pretty sure it was going to be permanent and set up like a manufacturing plant, or at least genetically engineer the new Jaffa that way.
Oh,
But, no, it doesn't. Like, here's the one thing to point out: Nishta is not just a gas; it's an organism. Because remember, like during the Seth episode, we talked like Carter talked about it, but Carter's dad, like Selmac, he talks about the fact like the reason why is that Nicotine blast can like discharge, can like kill, like remove it is because it kills the organism in your thing, and then afterwards you can't get reinfected. So that makes it sound like once it infects you the first time, your immune system doesn't know how to deal with it, so it just falls under its influence. But then if it gets killed, then it seems like your immune system can kill it the second time. So it seems like a disease of sorts that affects you, and if you don't get it killed, it doesn't go away. Probably changes your brain chemistry in many ways.
Oh, there's a few more things I want to say about the early edginess and the awfulness that is Hathor.
What?
Do you remember, like, there was a scene where they were taking out the people in the SGC, and they almost did it like we're dominoes in a row. It's just like, that's dumb. Or how, like, when Hathor was in her like hot tub thing with all the symbiotes, like all of a sudden she bursts into flames,
and then she somehow escapes it. Oh, and how about that?
Make any sense?
About that reused shot where they show her getting into the tub, getting out, and she's not wet.
Yeah, it's stupid. but
Well, I mean, in the end, it's just like there's a lot of things where it's just like you will always. It's just difficult because I mean, it's just different eras of television over time will always.
Yeah, some of my favorite episodes from season 1 is The Torment of Tantalus, and I think it's called Thor's Hammer. Yeah, Thor's Hammer. It's not Thor's Hammer.
Also, like the Kumkaya guy.
Okay, let's wait on Thor's Hammer until we want to talk about the Asgard.
Yes.
I have one more edgy thing I remembered from season 1.
Go ahead.
I liked the episode. It was the episode where they go to the place where the nanites cause people to age.
Oh no!
Basically, O'Neill canonically screwed that girl.
Yes, he did.
That's so edgy.
I mean, I don't know. I will say one thing that I always kind of appreciated with Stargate was because of the time period that is on Earth, I always felt there's a lot more realistic isn't the right word to use, but it was more like balance. I don't know. Balance per se, yeah. Because like I mean, like Babylon 5 to me is probably the most realistic if we entered that universe or response. But the thing is, like Stargate to me always felt like, especially like early on, because they're like the main thing that Stargate did was just because they went through the gate, but it was modern people. And let's be honest, modern people are not going to be the paragons that we think of from Star Trek or
they kind of ditched this idea of grounded realism, but then they brought right back with SGU, and I just don't think the show is meant for that because of how the direction it took off and what people fell in love with about it. Basically.
Yeah. So like it's just kind of like I feel like Stargate kind of made them like humans. I mean, like the fact like Michael Jackson, Daniel Jackson. I like completely like mixed their name, the IRL name.
It's a very different person.
Daniel Jackson, like I kind of like the fact like he stays. He's just like there's nothing on Earth for me, and it's just like I want to stay and like learn, and eventually, and have his life with Sharae.
It's
I
funny.
like that Stargate has a more realistic way that probably humans would react to these situations. Because in Star Trek, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna die of old age. I'm gonna be a paragon of virtue the whole time." It's like, no, that's not how a human would
It's
react.
the whole
It's
thing
funny.
of
It,
we are the evolved humans, which
yeah, it's
okay,
funny.
I love it. I love TNG. Patrick Stewart's Picard is great.
Yeah.
Oh my word, you are the most naive person ever.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned something about transitioning over from the movie, because one episode I appreciate is not the Nox. I do like that episode, but not the Nox. It's called Cold Lazarus, where they deal with this entity that's like a crystal that they bring back.
Oh, that was I really like that
Oh,
episode
Yes,
too.
because Jack gets stabbed with it. It's from I remember that episode.
Yeah, but it's because they deal with the fog from the movie. They're not ignoring it, even though it's been a year and they get new characters. It still touches on his life there, and it's a very lost on character stuff with his son, and that he finally gets a chance to properly say goodbye to this woman who's been a big, huge part of his life, and kind of at least end stably, if not happily, basically.
No, hold on. Is that the one where with the shape-shifting boy that looks like his
Yes.
son, or the one with the
Yes,
the
that's the
orb,
episode.
the orb where Jack gets stabbed in the gate room? Because that's the one with the shapeshifter, right?
The
It is
what?
the shapeshifter, yes.
Okay, yeah.
It is.
So
That's really the only episode that touches on his son. I thought that's the one time RDA feels like Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Because he did that very
Mhm.
somber moment.
Can I bring up another instance he feels like Kurt Russell? How about what the episode? What's it called? I forget the name, but he's trapped by Ball and he's being interrogated, and Daniel's trying to get him to a.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah, better person than that, Jack. That's where you're wrong. And that felt still like Kurt Russell. Like it's the same character, just hiding it.
okay, so before we got sidetracked, we were going to talk about what I like to call. You two don't know about this, but my friend Elliot here knows what I'm talking about. My edible friends.
The Asgard.
You want to know why I call them my edible friends?
I'm very creeped out.
Okay, when I first saw Thor, I was like, man, he looks so edible.
Oh my word.
I have no idea how to respond to this.
I don't know.
How dare you
so
desecrate the Asgard with edible thoughts?
Hey, which
And so I called
so-
Thor my edible friend, and then when they introduced others, it just stuck. I'm like, oh, they're my edible friends.
Ugh.
E-Man.
Look, I was having to check an episode list. I was trying to figure out which one came first, Torment Tantalus or Thor's Hammer.
It has to be
Those two
Tantalus. It's
episodes-
Tantalus because I remember like as we
No,
watched.
I'm on the wiki right now. It's Thor's Hammer, and the very next episode is Torment of
Oh,
Tantalus.
it is interesting.
Yes,
I thought it was the opposite.
Thor's Hammer is 10, Tantalus is 11. And
Oh
those
yeah.
two
Oh,
episodes
okay. 'Cause
completely changed the entire foundation of the series.
They do.
Yeah. The Torment of Tantalus, that thing with Ernest Littlefield, was just very good because you feel for the poor guy. He's been stuck there his whole life.
He's been stuck for 50 years, which then you go outside and realize, okay, what have you been living on for 50 years?
I don't know about that, but one thing I do know that I like is the fact that the same actor is played by the same guy who played Carson Beckett over on Stargate Atlantis.
Oh, wow, really?
Wait, really?
Yeah, the same actor who played Carson Beckett plays younger Ernest Littlefield.
Oh, younger. So I thought you were talking about the older ones. Like, wait, hold on, what?
That's what I mean.
No, I like the old one we see in the show, in the episode.
No, in the flashbacks.
Oh, yeah, the flashback makes sense. I
Yeah.
thought you were saying the older ones. Like, wait, hold on, no. That does
I
not
love
work.
I like... God, what's his name? Actor.
The Scotsman.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Asgard.
Yeah.
Asgard are...
Amazing.
When you want to talk about a secondary species in the show where they're allies, they're the old power, but they're not that overbearing force because hey, why is this a problem? The Asgard can solve it. Oh, why is this a problem? Then these people can solve it for us.
Yeah.
The Asgard just I just ripped my earbuds out.
Well, they're finding the
Ripped my
replicator.
earbuds out by accident. The Asgard do such a good job because
Yes.
the Asgard can solve, until Anubis shows up, the Asgard can solve literally anything.
Mhm.
But it's the fact that they show up just enough where they're great, but it's always they have to go way out of their way to get the Asgard to help, and even then the Asgard are, except for like when we come back to Thor's hammer when Hera attacks. Besides that, you barely see them.
Well, I mean, it's just because of the replicator war. It's just like in the end of the even like they're like, we want to do more. We wish we could do more. It's just that because of that war, and also the fact that like if we just did constant things, then like our ability to protect humans in this galaxy would be completely weakened.
Oh yeah,
Just because of
I'd
the
say-
current situations.
yeah. But I would say at the time, the replicators are not expanded upon for like a season or two later.
Can I?
We don't even know they exist then.
Can
I
I
mean-
just say how genius it is? This concept of the war between Asgard and the replicators in another galaxy is, think about it, the Asgard are clones. They transfer consciousness into new bodies, and they've lost the ability to reproduce. And they're like a Xerox copy. So their numbers are shrinking in very few. While the replicators are the inverse. They eat what they absorb. They build new materials, and they just expand exponentially. So it's like a war between people who can't breed, who are very few in number, and those who are just breeding like rabbits and creating new soldiers all the time.
Oh
It
yes,
isn't it?
the replicators are just such a cool concept. They're basically their version of
It's the great
Stargate's version of Borg.
They're the great
I-
goo.
The thing is like the Borg is terrifying in one way. Like they take you and they get rid of your independent thought. The problem with the replicators is like they don't care. It's just like they only care about technology. It's actually far more terrifying because the Borg are gonna like take away your like thoughts and stuff like that. But like the replicators are just gonna destroy everything.
The
and keep
Borg
going.
are closer to like the closest comparison to the Borg is probably the Cybermen from Doctor Who. In fact, they're almost
Yeah.
identical.
I've heard
The close
That makes sense,
comparison
yeah.
of the replicators would probably actually be Brainiac from DC.
But the replicators, though, they can absorb you into their hive. Look what they did to that IOA agent in Arc of Truth. It's just it's not their primary.
Well, I don't think that like the one thing I will say about before you use that example is just the fact that that was a very specific branch that we created using our
That too.
Asgard knowledge.
That
So
too.
it's kind of like so the replicators' ability to do that may be completely based on the fact that those replicators were made through the full power of the Asgard core in comparison. So
Besides,
you never really know. I kind of like I call that a little into question just because I don't think the normal replicators would have done that.
you mean difference between Reese's replicators and the IOA replicators?
And then
Yeah.
the replicators, and then the
Yeah.
ancient replicators, and then it's like 4 or 5 different replicators.
Well, yeah, and also don't forget, like the only reason why the IOA ones did that was just because they knew that they had a weakness. They did not know how to like get rid of it, so they had to like find it. And so the only person who knew was in a mental, like in a piece of flesh. So they were like, well, how do we get this? How do we force this knowledge out of him? Well, we directly implant ourselves. So I mean, like no other replicator probably ever had to do that. So you never know. But still, well, I mean. Human form replicators just could have stuck their hand in your head, and that would have just solved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, let's not get into replicators quite
Yeah.
yet, because I have a few plot holes to talk about them in another race.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk about
Back to the Asgard.
Thor's hammer. First introduction of a major species.
Oh.
That is not the gold. And we don't even actually get to see them yet. Because all that episode shows us is one, it shows us the Unas, the original species of hosts.
Yeah.
Great introduction for that. And then
I love the
shows us,
Unas.
and then it shows us the hammer itself, and the technology the hammer shows just kind of gives us an idea of what the Asgard are like.
It see the thing with the Stargate when I first watched it kind of felt like a mix of not Star Trek but Animorphs because it's the parasites and the original host bodies and that.
Yeah, with the Yerks.
Yeah, it felt like Animorphs.
I have not the faintest clue what you're talking about.
Yeah,
It's
but
a YA series from the 90s.
yeah, but it's. I do like what they did with the Unas later, though.
I love how Jack is like, wait, I thought that Unas was the only Unas.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like because it's a nice little episode. You get to see that because of the other chick that was on the planet, the host does survive,
Yeah.
which really changes things. That sets a lot of stuff down the line.
Yeah, they were liars. Nothing of the host survives. Right.
Yeah, it
And
changed
then-
everything because, like, because like at first they're like, "Oh, Sharae's gone. I won't be able to do anything about it." And
Not
then
just Sharae, Skara too.
Scarlet too, and it's just like, and they're like, "Well, they're lost forever. We have to kill them." And it's like, no, you just have to, and like, and it's so heartbreaking in that episode because like literally, it's just like all you have to do is bring them here, and you'll be free. They'll be free. And then, but then in order to free Teal'c, you had to destroy the hammer, and so they destroy it in order to do it. It's heartbreaking because it's just like this is our one chance, and they have to destroy it themselves.
Because remember, before this point, all we knew was Kowalski, who didn't survive his experience. But it just reminds me of the connections in this show. In late Atlantis, there's a character infested by a Goa'uld, and that Rodney talks about how they're gonna beam it out of him. It's very precise. When you look at Thor's hammer early on, it's kind of the same technology. It's just it weaves together. It's consistent.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's Caldwell. Yeah.
I was just really kind of sad some of the stuff they did to Sharae, and I wasn't like a huge fan of the whole like her being pregnant with the Apophis host baby thing. I wasn't a big fan
never
of that.
actually entirely explained whose baby that was because that baby comes out at a weird time. Like it's supposed to be with the Apophis host. It is also heavily implied to be Daniel's.
The Harcesis makes no sense. It's supposed to be that he wants the genetic memories of this host, but Goa'uld larvae already have genetic memories. So why would you do that?
Because it's okay. I haven't answered that, and this goes me having been admin in RP, trying to figure all this out. Because hey, I have to make a coherent plot for things. Yes, you have the genetic memory. It's heavily implied, though, a lot of it is locked. And we also have to keep in mind, you only have the genetic memory from your queen.
Yeah, who can control
Sharae might be... Amunet might be from a different queen, which means if he takes that, he has everything from his queen and her
that makes
queen.
sense.
And there's probably a lot of locked memories in there that you just aren't given access to that the Harcesis does.
Specifically, memories that are probably illegal among the Goa'uld.
Or just a lot of technical information and a lot of things that just like you might be talking like, oh, these are the queen. These might be the queen's memories. In which case, he's not just getting his information, her information. He's getting the queens that sired each of them information.
Well, because also don't forget,
he might be getting 3 individual sets of information.
Like, let's not forget that like Apophis was born of the queen of like the first like the major Goa'uld, like that first like the primordial ones, like the ones beforehand, like even like to Ra's parents. Ramanet has to probably be a younger generation. It's just like Apophis's symbiote because of like the era that exists in. I think it's like a Pep or something like that, like the old the ancient ones.
Yeah.
Like they have more ancient Goa'uld. Like there's probably information because of that doesn't exist.
Well, it comes
elsewhere.
from one of the RP guides. I've talked this with Jordan a lot. Because we sat down to discuss the timeline at one point. A lot of the first Goa'uld are almost certainly. You have Amunet, who was born into the Empire. Ra probably came out of that lake we see the Goa'uld started. Mm-hmm. He's probably one of the ones who hops out of the lake and takes Unas.
Probably.
There's a solid chance Apophis might have as well. He's a bit more of a toss-up. He's likely somewhere in the gray area.
But we know that they were brothers. Like Apophis and Ra were technically brothers.
Yes.
Though he might be a younger brother,
He would almost certainly been the younger one.
But I mean, it's still like Apophis, has this ancient thing to him because he has a more ancient, long lasting thing compared to the other ones. Like Hera is the son of. If you follow Egyptian mythology, it's just Hera Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis. So it's just there's younger lords that exist, which means it's. I always found that kind of funny because that technically means Apophis was fighting his nephew when he killed Hera.
Yeah, he does.
So, but the thing is, it's just there's these long-term things that change. And so I feel like there's a certain like understanding that there has to be this ancientness that exists from it, which is why it probably was more interesting for someone like Apophis to try to do a Harcesis compared to like someone like a younger Gold.
Yeah, and also the fact that the Harcesis is known to be illegal, and most of the System Lords have an interest in preserving their life, because if anyone finds out, everyone's going to gank you. Apophis, he's in this strong position. He's also one of the few who know it's one of those, you preach your propaganda so hard you believe in it.
Yeah,
Some System Lords did, some didn't. Lord used in between. Ball most certainly did not.
yeah,
Apophis is very much shown to believe it. He seems to believe his own propaganda.
yeah.
He's fallen into that delusion.
He's gone to the point where he truly believes he is a god, that he is undefeatable.
Yeah, it's true. That's why I like Ball so much, because he's. Can you imagine? Apophis would never work with anyone, like Ball does. But
he works with the SGC one time at the end of his reign when Sokar's chasing him, and that's because he understands he has literally no one else to go to.
Well, no. He literally says in an episode, "Oh, I'm not here to help you. I just know that if I come here, I condemn you to death too, because Sokar's coming after me."
The thing I was going to say about Ball is, Ball behaves in a way that's like the anti-Apophis. When he's interrogating Jack, he gives rewards for cooperation and punishment for disobedience, which is a villain who shows that he's not going to let pride get in the way of his goals.
Oh, yeah.
When Carter punched him, he just, because he knows he has very limited resources and backup, he just is like, I'm going to work with this in stride. Apophis would be raging, how dare you punch me, you filthy mortal.
I still love how Ball is so sexist.
Yeah.
He's just like, I have to work with a woman. It's just like,
and we get and also like, how many of the System Lords would you expect to work under Anubis as he did? He sits there under Anubis's thumb for what, a full year, just waiting his time, biding his time, hoping someone would take care of the problem for him, because he knows he's sitting in the perfect position of power if he does.
Yeah. Can I bring up something about the System Wars that I feel like I'm satisfied with the 2 Kronos episodes we got, but it feels like a character they could have done a lot more with.
I love the Kronos character. He's one of those characters who, like, he is perfectly like, he's like perfect Goa'uld prick behavior. It's just like he's so full of himself, but at the same time he's just like, I love, like, in the episode, like when we're discussing the Earth protected planet treaty, he's just like, oh yeah, I despise you all. I am so cool. I am, I'm Kronos. But at the same time, he's just like, yeah, I'll make a deal with you. And he's just like, I love that, like, final thing where they walk into the Stargate and he's just like, giving the warning that, like, yeah, we agree to this treaty, but if you are outside of your planet, I am more than happy to kill you myself.
Yeah.
He will make a deal with you, and he will, like, talk to you, but at the same time, he's like, oh, I'm still a Goa'uld. And he's one of those characters that was more unique at the very beginning.
My name is Kulak. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Which also, and that's another thing we don't really talk about, the show barely talks about, is the fact that most of the System Lords follow a culture. Apophis is Egyptian. But if you look at Chulak isn't Egyptian. Chulak has Greek architecture. And that's because Chulak was a former world of Kronos.
Ooh, details!
That Apophis takes over.
Yeah.
He takes over a world of Apophis and Apophis takes over a world of Kronos and makes that his new capital. We never see an actual world of Apophis with Egyptian architecture.
Well, I mean, because, like, wasn't it kind of like hinted that Apophis kind of ruled with Ra technically, and so, like, when Ra died, he kind of just assumed a lot of Ra's territory.
Well, no, it's stated somewhere when Ra died,
power vacuum.
There was basically, because the whole thing is the System Lords were at relative peace because Ra had the hammer to bash anyone who got out of line. He had his enemies, obviously, but he generally understood the balance of power and let things be. When he died, everyone made a mad dash. Apophis became the winner. He became the new strongest. The fact is, though, everyone was taking a piece of the pie. Herewur only got what was left, and Herewur was still the strongest System Lord after presumably Apophis. and
And
Sokar's
Kronos.
hidden forces.
Well, don't forget, Kronos was considered the most influential
Influential,
outside
yes,
of
but not
Apophis.
powerful.
True.
He had the political savvy, not the military might.
Well, what is it that Jacob said that they knock off 2 system lords, another horrible one fills their place? Someone even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder. That
that's
is very true.
That's what I like about the show is the foreshadowing. Like even how Apophis finally meets his end after evading death for so long. How was he killed? What doomed the system wars, the replicators.
Yeah,
Could've
there's foreshadowing. I mean, like the thing is, like global politics is very fascinating. It's an endemically feudal system. Like, okay, I mentioned earlier, it's just like because like G-Man was talking about like how all the people in the Goa'uld are just agrarian. They're only industrial enough to build a hatak, and that's really it. And it's just like,
That depends on the world. Most of them are just
Yeah.
miners or farmers.
yeah, and so like that's the thing is like that's how they rule. They're feudal lords over these people with just interstellar empires.
Here,
If we want to talk about the Goa'uld feudal state, let's go to my 2 favorite episodes, The Council Part 1 and 2. I love those episodes.
and
Not Council 1 and 2. Because if you went before Council 1 and 2, the only system lords we've met are Apophis, who's dead, Kronos, who's dead, Nearty, who is either dead or missing persona non grata at this point. I don't remember. Hathor, who is dead. Sokar, who is dead, and Lord Yu, who Daniel uses to slip in, so non-factor. You get to meet that episode, especially the first one, spends the entire time setting up every other major Goa'uld who we've vaguely heard of.
It was left
but
too.
But we hadn't seen them, and so you get a whole slew of new faces, and that whole conversation between Daniel and Lord Yu talk about, oh, don't accept gifts from Baal. They tend to blow up. Don't get too close with Bastet and Kali because they did a party with Sobek and put his head on a spike.
I love how Bastet. I love how like literally they're talking about like the girl power team of Bastet and Kali who are just like. Real quick, I'm sorry. I just want to make this one point that I always found interesting as a huge mythology and like religions. Because like I study the War of the Diadochi a lot. I love how Stargate, like all the Goa'uld, are religions that touched each other. Like Hellenic,
That's
Egyptian,
so true.
Canaanite, and even Hinduism was touched by Alexander's empire when it conquered much of India, like modern day Pakistan. All the religions of the Goa'uld, like that system lords inhabit, are religions that touch each other in the real world at one point or another. And then the religions that counter it, like Asgard Norseism, is a religion that never touched Hellenicism or any of the other world.
We also know that the we know Amaterasu is a Goa'uld. That's mentioned in the book somewhere. So we know the Japanese Shintoism and then the whole Chinese stuff is System Lord. Because that's another thing. Lord Yu or Lord Yu Huang Sheng Ti isn't a god. He's the first emperor of China.
And the Greco-Bactrian kingdom touched the first dynasties of China. They traded.
Yeah, but it's like that's the thing about Lord Yu. Is like he's supposed to be a system lord, a god. But you look at Earth, he is in history. He is the first lord of China. He is the great unifier of China.
Let's also not forget that like. We could get into a huge discussion about like how like what like Asian religions, especially Chinese. Don't forget that Confucianism is more like a set of rules and guidelines. It's legal. It's like a lot more legalistic. So in a way, a person who was the first person to unify China literally sounds like a deity to a Confucian. And I won't I probably am wrong. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't know a ton about it. But the fact is like I could understand why a rule set based religion would probably idolize people.
Lord Yu is really interesting. Not only does he train a man to have a god. Do you know who his first prime is?
Oh yeah, it's
Do you know Edward? Do you two know who because Oshu, his first prime? Do you know who he is?
Who again?
You know Oshu, his Lord Yu's first prime.
Oshu, kind of.
But do you know who he's supposed to be?
You have to elaborate because
Oshu was the guy who, whenever they're taking on this Anubis alliance, was the guy under Lord.
What G-Man's trying to tell you is that Oshu is a clone of Sun Tzu.
Oshu is the guy who admitted that.
Oh,
Remember the guy who admitted to Teal'c that
Yeah. We like
Yeah.
what, like
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
He's
but
trying to
right,
tell. He's trying to explain that Oshu is supposed to be
Hey.
the clone of Sun Tzu, the famous person who wrote
but
The Art
I'm
of War.
trying to tell Iron it. Oshu is that guy who told Teal'c that Lord Yu is getting a bit around the bend in years. Remember him?
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Oshu is the 12th clone of Sun Tzu.
Yeah,
Because apparently Sun Tzu left such an impression on Lord Yu that he saves his DNA and has repeatedly cloned him over the last 3,000 or 4,000 years.
that
That's
explains
so
it.
cool.
I always wondered because of his age. I guess he's like the Vorta then. You were talking about the system wars for a while. Something I want to bring up for a bit now is an episode I recently saw, The Light, and that's some good Goa'uld world building there about how this kind of
Which
unique.
one is the light?
It's where they're in this Goa'uld opium den. It's this kind of unique sci-fi idea about an opium den, which they've had for a very long time, but in a sci-fi context. And there's a scene where the light is specifically tailored so that those with a symbiote are immune, but it's meant to keep their human slaves nearby. If they venture very far,
That one.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember. I had an idea what it was. I needed to make sure.
yeah, I thought that was a good piece of Goa'uld world building, basically.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
that's-
it's interesting because there's a lot of the thing is especially with the Goa'uld, it's just there's a ton of interesting politics and other concepts that exist because of the existence of how long they are. But we also got to forget that the Goa'uld are still people, sort of, as symbiotes. They have their desires, their interests, and I mean, all feudal lords participate in things that make them feel good.
Okay, so I see this. We're coming up pretty high now. So are there other aspects of SQ1 we could talk about? But
yeah.
the system.
Okay. Jumping back a bit to season one. Torment Tantalus and what that sets up. That sets up so much. Pretty much a lot of what the rest of the series goes into is predicated on Torment Tantalus because you have the Asgard, which we'll talk more. Of course, you have the Furlings. The unfortunate Furlings who we never see. You got the Nox, who are that's an interesting group. And then, of course, lo and behold, the Ancients, who, are kind of like the end-all, be-all. They are the reason everything happens. Stargate, Goa'uld, Ori, Wraith, almost all the bad guys only become bad guys because of the Ancients.
Yeah.
But the good guys also only win because of the Ancients.
Yeah, one thing I love about the show is the sense of progression. Because you got to remember, in the 90s when this first came out, shows were still episodic. They weren't that heavily serialized, at least until Babylon 5. And you start the show with these ragtag group of barbarians, basically these monkeys who found alien technology. By the end of the show, they built their own ships. They're using the Stargate network, and they're establishing a foothold in space after beating their enemies and taking down an empire.
Yeah, and seeing that progression of technology in the show was just so cool.
Oh yeah, that was
like this, where in season 4 they're taking these baby steps. It's how it is in real life, where they're retrofitting one of the captured death gliders that they have, except they get shot out into deep space, so that didn't work. But then the next time we see it, it's a human engineer based off the template. Now, granted, the hyperdrive on it doesn't work, but it still serves as a good fighter. And then they're moving on to these battle cruisers, and then they're still testing them because it was hijacked into space. It wasn't ready. But then they're going on a shakedown cruise, and they're stuck on that planet right up until the time that Anubis attacked. And it's kind of really a whole new game changer, basically.
Yeah,
I do. At one point, I would like to make, and I feel like Atlantis kind of spoiled us because, by the time Atlantis happened, they got spoiled because of all of Stargate's already progression. Because, I always kind of forget because Atlantis, season 1, the end of season 1, we get to see the, they send the ship over with the ZPM, the Daedalus. But the thing is, all of Atlantis, they always get the advancements of the of everything that SG1 had to go through. So when I rewatched SG1, I always forget that the first time with the Ori the defense satellite, they go with the Prometheus. They don't go with any of the X302s. They literally go with the Prometheus. That's how it gets blown up. And that's by the Ori time. And it's just I always forget that Stargate had progressed so much by that point that Atlantis got spoiled by it because like, they got everything that Stargate had been SG-1 had been building up to.
The only issue I ever have with tech regression is I felt, because I am an engineer, I understand at least somewhat the application of designing and developing this stuff.
Yeah,
is it happens so fast.
I know that. I have some theories on that the post here, but one thing I think makes this very clear is remember the time that Sam blew up a sun? That was done under pressure to defeat an enemy fleet, and it was a long shot. When Rodney does it, it's kind of tied into the arrogance of humanity at that point. They had so much handed to them, and they needed to kind of temper it.
The Rodney Carter dynamic is hilarious.
Oh boy, yes.
The season 2 episode where he gets trapped at the bottom of the ocean and get the whole Carter in a bikini suit.
Oh my god, that was like a throwback to back. I mean, it's kind of cool because they kind of really go into like this whole thing that Rodney's kind of like like a modern day nerd, and this is like they have no interaction with women. It's just I don't know.
And then they get reference in SG-1 when they go there. It's like, yeah, you saved my life.
TV shows had more continuity in their spinoffs than Star Trek did. It's just
true. I mean, Star Trek, the original, like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager were pretty consistent with one another. It's just that the spinoffs afterwards.
I mean, where Stargate has more of an impression of a lived-in universe where things that happen matter and that they come back to revisit the consequences of that.
I just love that Earth, no matter what happens, is always going to be so super advanced that like they are literally like I don't know. Earth long term is probably going to be more advanced than the Ancient and the Asgard because they literally have both of their technologies and they're going to be able to implement them really quickly.
Let's talk about Earth really quick because the big thing is SG-1 is always, at least in the beginning, the show portrays itself as it's real life, but the military is doing these shenanigans until we get to about season 4, season 5, and you realize this is not Earth. This is such a different world because. Look at the geopolitics of this place. I know because I talk about this Jordan all the time. Jordan, he's an avid patriot. He gets really pissed off about all this kind of stuff. And I understand why he does. I disagree with him on a lot of it because I have weird political tastes. Everton knows what I mean. I have very weird political beliefs. And it's the fact that the political scene in the show is a lot of SG-1 is very U.S. focused, and Atlantis is very international focused because it's an international group. And you see, look if you want a political climate in 2000, especially like the recent years. Oh, look at now between the U.S. and Russia. Yeah, they're not working together anytime soon.
Boy,
SG-1, the foundational alliance is the U.S. and Russia working together.
Yeah, I mean the problem with SG-1 is like they like G-Man can tell you if he wants. It's just like in the end, it's like. My experience in politics is very direct because I work in government. And I will say it's just that, like, the problem is SG-1 was built on the idea that everyone thought. Like, it's the Fukushima idea, not Fukuyama point, where it's like the end of the Cold War was the end of history. Everyone's going to get along now. And, like, they kind of based off the idea and hopes that Russia and the United States were going to become friends.
That's why the new show today will not work. I mean, look at that line from the Chinese guy. He said, the government of China does not believe in keeping secrets from its people.
When I first saw that line, I was like 8. I didn't understand it. I've rewatched the episode since. Dude, I paused the show and laughed so hard.
What he means is he doesn't believe in keeping our secrets for us.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is just that, like, they designed the show based off that, like, post-Cold War idea that, like, everyone's going to become friendly now. The Soviet Union's gone. They're all going to be, they can all work together in the end. Yeah, no, that's not what happened.
That's why I don't want Stargate to come back. That's why I don't want a new show. I think that core element is missing.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't work. And the thing is, like, Stargate, I mean, in reality, like, G-Man have talked about it, and, like, with Jordan as well. It's just, like, a nuclear war would have happened over the Stargate at this point. Literally, like the fact like the behind the scenes negotiations would never work in the same way, considering the political climate that's existed since the Cold War.
Well, the one world where we see the Stargate get revealed. Okay, we see the Stargate get revealed in 2 worlds. The one with the Ashen, but that's post-tension and everything. Apparently it worked out, but we don't see the negotiations or anything. And then the one where Carter, using the Merlin device, gets thrown to another universe, and Landry is president. And it gets specifically mentioned when the Ori attack, when the program is revealed, the nation falls. It doesn't fall into civil war. It gets close. Gets pretty close.
Yeah, well, I should probably speed things up a bit because there's only like hour and a half left. We should probably get to the later elements of SG1, like
Oh yeah, talk about the Ori.
Ori. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
we're skipping the replicators.
Yeah, just say
Oh yeah, let's talk about the replicators first.
Okay.
The replicator Asgard dynamic is so interesting. Thor is such an interesting character because
Freya.
he sacrifices himself 3 times.
So Freya, that's so funny. I will say, like, kind of like to bridge what we were talking about earlier with the Asgard and like up to the replicator real quick. It's just like we get to see an interesting dynamic, and I love how Thor's just like, you do not want to know what we deal with. Like, I really did not want to introduce you to this, but I had no choice because of what happened. But we get to see like that, like the foreshadowing of like literally the day that like Thor's just like, one day this threat might come to you, and I don't know how you're gonna deal with it.
I recently saw that episode. Something that always stuck with me, even since I first watched it, is the ending scene where they're attracted to energy bursts. They're in like this cargo bay, and they're beamed into Stargate. They die with the Stargate, then they beamed in Carter because they're trying to take the ship out. And there's just these huge swarms. The whole replicators are just coming right to this one area, and they're just barely holding them off. It's just so cool.
I don't know. This is a weird plot. Sorry, I just want to like make this one plot point because you just reminded me. I remember when I was a kid because they were talking about like, they eat technology and that's how they make better replicators. I was always like, why didn't they eat the Stargate? Wouldn't then we have ancient replicators at that point? I was always
that is a bit of a plot hole. One thing with the replicators is I like how they explain that. Star Trek did the same thing. They gave us the Borg Queen because it's very hard to ride for a single collectivist nation that is increasingly becoming more seemingly invincible, with their mistakes being not repeated. They gave us the Borg Queen, but they didn't explain how. At least Stargate showed the progenitor to the replicators in Reese, and they programmed them, they brought them back, and they created the others first, and then it went to Fifth, who was unstable, which is what brought their downfall.
Well, also, they explained the whole point of the humanoids. It's different. The Queen in Star Trek was a really odd thing because it was everything the Borg were not supposed to be, which is odd. But the difference is the replicators did not need that human form to basically act as their quote queen. They functioned just fine, but they functioned almost animalistic in that they just followed the subroutines. What the human forms provided was guidance. It gave them a sense of direction and purpose and a mission.
Yeah, but I feel like if First had been taking the charge instead of Fifth, who even by his own admission was very unstable, then things would have gone better. Because Fifth had this infatuation with Carter, and he created Replicator, and that was just his undoing.
I think the point that you kind of have to like, I feel like you're missing with that is literally First was in control. Literally until like they manipulated Fifth. Like O'Neill so dirtily manipulated Fifth. But like the thing is like
what happened to him.
I know. Like I mean like the thing is like First says it's just like Fifth was a mistake because we tried to like be more like Reese, and it was a big mistake because like it didn't work the way they hoped. And like but the problem is like First kind of admits it's just like, I can like, he's the closest to the replicators as a human form, but like, they were trying to experiment with adding more like grand vision to it. And it kind of didn't work. But the only reason why Fifth fully takes control is just because after he was the only one who left, but because of the Carter thing, he left Hala before the rest got killed.
At least when they left Neum behind, it's because they had no choice. They were taking him with them. They learned from their mistakes, but then the others took control of him. So what can you do? They had to shoot him out into space.
Mm-hmm. The Fifth thing is like its own thing. Like,
that's such a.
I understand.
I'm just gonna like throw this tidbit if we actually do reach that point, but like I never really liked the Asurans personally, but
I don't mind them. But
we'll get to the Asurans. We'll get to it later.
All we said about the replicators, maybe the Ori now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I will just
things about Stargate is, it's weird, but true like aliens are kind of rare.
Yeah, mostly it's transplanted humans. I mean, remember the Ritu? Anyone?
You have the Ritu. You have the Grace aliens who we never actually see.
We also have the
aliens from Heberdan.
Unos,
The
Do you remember those
that
weird
com- that
mushroom
tech company.
things?
Hebridans.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
no,
that's what they're
Nice.
they're
called.
not called Hebridans. Hebridans are the humans. They're from a different world.
The
They
Surakan,
liberate
the
Hebridans.
Surakan,
Yes.
yeah. That they are an interesting group, a TechCon group. Space capitalism.
Yeah. Space capitalism for the win. They even chase up the gold.
I found that hilarious. I don't know. I will say that's one thing I never really understood. Is like I know that they did it to try to include more like different races in it. It didn't really make sense for how the Gaul would react. To me, I feel like if someone kicked them off with such advanced technology, they would like show up with an armada and be like, "Go away, die."
One thing I love about Stargate is they did shows you couldn't do today. Because remember the episode with the Unas and the slavers? They were
Mhm.
taking
Yes, yeah.
this is such a complicated issue that lasts from generation to generation. We cannot take sides. It's messy, and we could be stuck here for a while. And that's not something they do today. You need to take a hard line stance against slavery. Or how about vaccine causes sterility? Ooh, they would hate that today. They hate it. They hate it.
Well, the thing is, like, I mean, depending on, I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole of that, like how a modern show would work. But I mean,
Yeah, but the thing about Stargate is its bounding sense of optimism because it's both after the fall of the wall, but before the fall of the towers, basically.
I mean, yeah, you could argue that Stargate is optimistic, but at the same time, it's kind of like they're optimistic in a more practical way compared to, like, say, Star Trek. That's the thing is, like, the modern shows are kind of failing at. It's like they're trying to be utopian while also like just throwing in modern stuff, and it kind of like rubs people the wrong way. Where Stargate tried to practically deal with optimism, like, it's like, oh, we really can't just do everything because there's this whole history behind it. But anyways, as I said, that's its own rabbit hole. Because I know we kind of wanted to talk about like the
Well,
Ori.
before we get to Ori, you have the other big elephant in the room, and that is Anubis.
Yeah.
Anubis, like, yeah, we talked about the gold, but Anubis is really his own thing.
Yeah, because Anubis is a Goa'uld, but he's not beholden to them because he's half ascended, so he's like part ancient, and that just
But like of all the villains and everything we see, the Ori, yeah, they're evil, but their followers are more mixed, as we see with Toman. The other gold are mixed bag balls, kind of middle. Lord Yu actually isn't that bad. If there's a system lord I had to live under, I'd probably have to choose Lord Yu. He's not too bad.
Yeah, he's kind of a reasonable guy.
He's kind of chill. You, of course, and you
So
have
you're saying
everything in
you're
between.
reasonable?
You have everything in between. You have the replicators who are not evil. They're just
And a force of nature.
yeah. Until they get the human forms, they're just a force of nature. They don't kill you because they don't kill you for the sake of killing you because murder. They kill you because you're in the way.
But Anubis
Anything in their path, they will just.
Anubis is like Dark Nihilus or Nihilus from KOTOR 2.
Yeah,
More like Emperor Palpatine or Emperor Vitiate.
he is the closest we ever get to a pure evil.
Well, I love how like his entire evilness is literally spurred on just because the ancients are like, we must punish Oma until Oma figures out what she's supposed to do because we are so enigmatic. Because we just hate. I don't know. I hate the ascended beings, but I also love them. I don't know. Their whole like morality complex is like, what the hell is wrong with you? They're like, yes, we must stand aside, yet at the same time, we will literally make them suffer as long as we teach a lesson to an ascended being.
But the thing about Stargate is very late into its run, despite slightly lax continuity standards, like how Carter's a brain surgeon when she shouldn't be, there's also the fact that it's unraveling all these past stories in a way that further fleshes them out and gives depth to them. Like Anubis is just a traditional cackling bad guy, but by season 8, we know his plans. He's trying to wipe out all life in the galaxy and rebuild it the way he sees fit. But then when the Ori come in, you learn that ascended beings get an energy transfer from worship that would not affect normal Goa'uld because they're on these lower planes. But for Anubis, it actually gives him a power boost. And
well, I mean, the one thing to point out though is just like, yes, the Ori they want worshippers so they have more power. But I mean, the ancients already had a ton of power already. They didn't require the people of the Milky Way and Pegasus to worship them to become powerful. They already had inherent power for being ascended. It's just that the Ori wanted more power because they realized they could
It's
use
also
it.
heavily implied by how they're done. The ancients actually significantly outnumbered the Ori. The Ori were a very small group because of how selective they are.
I mean, because like the Ori were still afraid. They didn't want to just hop over to the Milky Way and fight a battle against the ancients. Like
because they needed that to build up that power first before they even attempted.
Yeah, like they didn't have enough
wanted-
power even
they
in their
only
own
wanted to-
galaxy.
They
with
only
even
wanted
just-
to fight a battle when they were sure of success, and they
Mhm.
believed 2, maybe 3 galaxies they found out about Pegasus. Say 2 galaxies. Say they didn't know about Pegasus, so 2 galaxies. They believed 2 galaxies worth of populations would have given them sufficient power.
I mean, it is always the question of can actually ascended beings truly kill each other? Because I mean, technically, we've seen like
Stand
like Morgan Le Fay fighting, Adria. It's kind of implied that they didn't actually kill each other properly. They're
It's
in an
eternal
eternal
battle, yeah.
battle. It's an eternal battle. So maybe the idea that the Ori need overwhelming power to actually destroy an ascended being.
Well, that comes into they probably understand they're outnumbered by the ancients. So yeah, 1-on-1 they tie, but they're not fighting 1-on-1. They're fighting 1-on-3.
Yeah.
So yeah, you tie one, and then the other 2 ancients proceed to stab you in the back.
When you look at what the later motivations and how it drives Anubis, when he tells Herak, "What you just saw was not my doing," it probably makes sense because it's one of the ancients' rules.
Yeah, I do love that. I do love that Anubis is like brutally honest. He doesn't lie to you. Like he doesn't go, "Oh yes, my favorite powers." Nah, yeah, that wasn't me. This is though. Blows up Abydos.
And Anubis will kill his underlings if they fail him, like when they fail to get the information from the ancient repository. But if it's practical, he will bring them up to keep serving him, like when they were on that planet where they leaked the info for his super weapon, and he asked if he should do something. He says, "Bring up the men first," basically. So Anubis is also a lot more practical than the earlier like Apophis and stuff.
Well, I mean, because like he knows that there's no point in the fallacy. He's just like the thing is like the goal will need the fallacy, especially if, like for the feudal order to work. Like they need that like religion and like monarchical aspect in order to keep their followers in line. Anubis is just like, I have the technology and power to just force them to serve me. I don't need them to worship me.
Yeah.
I just need them to serve me.
Also, the Goa'uld have to hold up this long-standing image because they've ruled for 20,000 years and they plan to rule for another 20,000. Anubis, he kept it up, but he's looking at, the galaxy's going to be dead in like a handful of years because I'm going to clear it out with the car weapon. I don't need to keep up this fallacy. As long as my men remain loyal to me for the little time they have left to live, I don't care.
Yeah, can I bring up something? Is it a bit of a plot hole in late SG1 where the Lucian Alliance comes out of nowhere? Because Vala, when she comes in, seems to be like these independent groups that have no contact with the Goa'uld, that are isolated off the Stargate network, and yet they're like free, but they're like not free.
I mean, we technically know there are free groups like TechCon and like there's other groups that exist. It's just that they had like this tenuous existence where it's just like they're at the fringes of known.
The Lucian Alliance power comes strictly out of the fall of. It comes from it's the gap between seasons 8 and 9.
Yeah, because they took a lot of the Goa'uld's ships and such.
Yeah, because their whole thing is it's the rise of the Jaffa and the rise of the Lucian Alliance is because the system lords just collapse. And so you get the Jaffa nation established, Jaffa established, and the Lucian Alliance just pick up a bunch of stuff because basically got abandoned.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like G-Man and I have like gone in like hours of discussing the Goa'uld state building, the Free Jaffa state building and stuff like that. But it's just like it makes sense. I mean, the Jaffa nation only serves Jaffa. I mean, they're kind of racist, but
They do not care about all the human slaves.
They do not
got abandoned.
Yeah, they only care about the Jaffa, and like they would like I don't know. Like I mentioned the GMs. I feel like the Jaffa would literally kick humans off their worlds if they had the
it's the issue of, and we see this, like for example, we saw this in post-colonial Africa. A lot of the states that came out of there, where especially a lot of the core territories where you had the actual Africans rise to power. What they did, they basically turned around and did to their white populations what the Europeans are doing to them.
Yeah.
You do, because the only model state they have to follow is the Goa'uld. They don't want to follow Earth, and they don't know about enough to care. So they mirror Earth. What does Garrett do? Garrett does a rule by power, rule by military might. It's identical to the Goa'uld.
Look at what they're doing. There's a lot of Jaffa we've seen that won't take the Tritonin because they feel it will weaken them, or the fact that it does actually like kill them. So they're taking the Goa'uld out there, at least until they can absorb into it more.
Yeah, because
I mean, it's just like it's in the end. It's just like I feel like the thing that is really interesting about the Jaffa, like they were the enforcers of an order, and so now that they're in charge of the order, they really have like this issue where they don't know what else they can do. And you have Teal'c and like Braytak who are like, we spend time with Earth, we've seen like how they run themselves, let's do it.
They didn't think about what would come next. That's something Braytak even admitted, which I like. It's realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, they didn't.
Braytek
Like, they
is
just
so
wanted to.
cool.
Well, I mean, don't forget that Teal'c. Like, remember they're doing that episode with the Avatar stuff, like when he's like in the video game, and literally like Samantha Carr is talking about like how back in the day when they first interacted with that people that do like the mind stuff, I forget their name. Apparently, according to the mental scan, Teal'c never thought they'd actually win. They didn't even think they had a chance to actually overthrow the Goa'uld, and so that's why they never thought about it.
Iron, you've been kind of quiet for a while. What do you make of all this?
See, well, yeah, I wanted to talk about kind of that late era Stargate. One of the best things to come out of that like Ori era is Vala.
Oh no!
Again, he's a major Vala simp.
Yes,
I
I'm a
remember
huge
Edward
simp
does not
for
like
her.
Vala.
Oh, what?
Edward does not like Vala, if I remember right.
I despise her.
Very early on, she was kind of. Some people found it hard for her to like, but like my friend Elliot here, he didn't like her at first, but she grew like I liked her from the start.
I saw her as she has kind of the action of Jack with the knowledge of Daniel, but she's a bit that tomboyish. Like she's basically Teal'c. She has the information of Teal'c, but it's a girl with the tomboy that kind of likes to do stuff.
Well, they expand on it very later that she's basically just spent her whole life running, and when you see her father or something, it keeps clicking right into place that it makes sense that she's found her place, and that everyone should have a place that they're a part of, and she's actually a loyal ally. So I appreciate that from a pure character progression.
Oh yeah,
indeed.
Yeah, and another thing to talk about is also right before we get to the Ori. Is looking back at all the worlds, like all the independent factions and worlds we see, and look what happens to them. Anubis comes in, Abydos dies, the Tolans die. The Tolans were a powerhouse. Of all the human factions, they were the strongest. They just die, just gone. The Ori, because of the Ori, the world with the Ram Protectorate and the other faction dies. So many worlds that we hear in Heberden, the one with the capitalist one, that world does not die, but the Ori conquer it. So many human societies either die out or get conquered.
I think one thing, just like one point I would like to make, is that Anubis actually did the most work to completely destroy the Goa'uld infrastructure. Because I think he took so much control of it, and especially after the replicators, the
Cold Warriors.
The
Cold Warriors are so cool.
Yeah, thanks to Anubis, he destroyed the ability of the Goa'uld to ever recover because of how much he centralized it all around himself. And then I love this idea. He's just like, I will sacrifice everything so the free Goa'uld. Like the free Jaffa will go to Dakara, then I'll kill them, kill the replicators, kill everything. And literally, he destroys the Goa'uld world order because of it.
Oh, you know what? Another faction we haven't talked about yet? The Tok'ra.
Oh yes,
they're such pricks, but they're also so heartfelt.
Yeah,
I will say. I mean, the thing is, just to me, is I don't know. I kind of had this realization. I told G-Man, but I always kind of felt bad for the Tok'ra for the sheer fact that one, they were never going to reproduce because Egeria is dead. But the other thing is I always kind of feel bad for them because mentally they were programmed to always be like this. It's one of those things I've always I talked to G-Man about this idea that do the Goa'uld actually have free will because their queens imprint what they believe and what they do. So the Tok'ra were bred to resist the Goa'uld, and I'm always
I do have an answer for that, and that is
my god, that is something I would prefer to explore more in a new show.
Well, I do have an answer to that question, Edward. Is remember when we go to the Tok'ra on the first world of the Boresh, I think the leader of that base, she is not Tok'ra by birth. Teal explicitly mentions she is a traitor. She was Goa'uld who turns.
Yeah, but I mean, still, it's just like the thing is like the Tok'ra had to exist in order to
No, no.
eventually confuse.
Oh, yeah.
turn them.
But that does show some element of free will in that she is able to turn and change.
Yeah, okay.
Do you guys remember that one Tok'ra chick? She's
Anise.
kind of like
Oh, the scientist girl!
she was like Stargate's answer to 7 of 9. She appeared like three episodes.
The
and then she
scientist
Oh yeah,
girl
Anise.
with the gray tube top, and
Isn't that Anise?
Yeah,
yes,
Anise was her name.
Oh my gosh.
Deliberately provocative outfit.
I guess you wouldn't get that today. They'd be screaming about it on Twitter.
Oh my word!
But what I love about Stargate is the epic fleet battles when the defense over Antarctica, the battle with the Ori satellite on that planet, the battle of P3Y229, which just takes place a few weeks, 2 extragalactic invasions within a few weeks of another on Atlantis and SG-1, and just all these epic battles they're so cool. The fall of Dakar, just stunning.
Battle Dakar. Okay,
I love how you went from Anise's outfit to battles in space.
I suddenly wanted to change topic before we got written up.
I'm trying to speed this along because I'm concerned about the time.
I mean, the thing is, like, we can always focus on certain aspects of SG-1, and then at a later time discuss more in depth the idea of Atlantis's differences.
We can always meet up again next Saturday if we want to.
I don't know. What do you think, Iron?
I mean, 10 seasons of SG-1 is hard to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
SG-1 is longer than SGA and SGU combined.
Yeah.
So we like the amount of time we spent on SG-1 is at the same time probably spent on SGA and SGU combined. Again, if we're talking about just length of time.
And we're just kind of skip noting like the major aspects of it already.
Yeah, I already I had a small list I was thinking about. I've just kind of thrown out half of it because I realized.
Well, we could organize a part 2, but it's still, I think, for the sake of brevity, we could maybe focus on Atlantis now.
Yeah, let's go over
we haven't talked about the Aura yet.
Oh yeah, what?
We haven't really talked about.
Yeah, let's talk about the Aura real quick, and then we can.
Well, the first thing to talk about the Aura is also the idea of. Originally, SG-1 was supposed to end at the end of season 8. Anubis is gone, so the Goa'uld are gone, the replicators are gone. Everyone's problems are solved. Yes, Ball got away, but besides that, everything is solved. Anubis is actually gone. Literally everything is nicely written up, and then they continue the show when they could have been done. What do you guys have thoughts about that? Like, do you think the show should have ended?
I'm pleased with how it ended now, but I think I would have loved season 11 because one idea they were throwing around was Anubis comes back with the Ori stuff, and I'd love to see like that kind of.
Yeah, he was gonna be like the leader of the Ori.
What?
I've
heard. I've heard nothing about that.
Me neither.
Yeah,
that would be completely.
That completely ruins Oma.
Yeah, it literally does.
Because Oma's whole sacrifice is she sacrifices herself to take him out,
or to fight the eternal battle.
Yeah, but like the whole point is you're fighting Adria for the Ori, and you're not gonna write off Adria to replace with Anubis. That's just bad writing.
I feel like late Stargate was a lot of recycling its earlier elements, but in a way that I feel like Hollywood has problems with today. They recycle everything to meet a marketing quota, but Stargate did it very well. I mean, Adria is the new version of the Harcesis, and yet it's loophole abuse because they can't interfere directly in the Milky Way and the false god stuff and everything. Basically,
I will just say real quick though, it's just like we really don't know exactly what would have happened, because the thing is it's like it's a very different process behind the scenes to what you're thinking might happen compared to what you'll actually think of once you're sitting at that table having to actually plan it out. So maybe it was one of those ideas they threw out and like, yeah, we'll do that, but then they're like, oh wait, we're ending at season 10. Let's make a very rushed episode where we kill the Asgard so that Earth can have all this goodies.
Yes, unending.
I was really sad when that happened to my.
Me too.
Friends.
My headcanon was always that the ancients for just the good work the Asgard.
You know what I do in the new show? If I was going to bring the Asgard back, say that it was that they beamed their whole population in these underground stasis pods, and that was just a front to fool the Ori, and that they can be revived at a later date because they have consciousness and it can be cloned into new bodies. I do that.
So
I
the
still,
big-
I
I'd
still
like
wish
for
we.
that
I
to
just,
happen.
just one little thing with an Atlantis tie-in. I always wanted to see Thor in one of the Pegasus Asgard talk. That would have been so interesting to see.
the veneer, yeah.
The veneer.
But so talk about the Ori. What do you guys have the thoughts on the whole? Because while religion did kind of play a thing in the earlier part, because the Goa'uld are gods, and the Asgard were pseudo portraying gods, not entirely though. They did it more because they realized, yeah, we have to do this. We don't want to, but oh well. The Ori really get into the whole religious aspect, like. They write their own Bible and everything. They have their prophets, which are
origin.
priors. They go all in on the religion, and which makes the last couple seasons feel like very anti-religious, which I have very mixed feelings about that. But
They clearly are aping Christian missionaries, but to their credit, they're portrayed as in a realistic, sympathetic way, where they're not mindlessly evil. They just truly believe in the promise that they're going to be ascended. If the Ori weren't such dicks, they would. And who wouldn't among us wouldn't want that kind of idea?
and then we get that so excellent debate between a prior and Daniel. I love that debate.
Yes, the priors.
One of my favorite episodes in the later series with the Ori is Beachhead, where they just take this whole planet and make a supergate out of like a black hole.
They collapse the planet into a black hole.
Yeah.
Poor Jaffa. They did not. The Jaffa that planet did not know what was coming.
Oh yeah.
The Ori aren't treated, despite how they come off, they aren't treated as 100% like sadistic. They're just part of a real power structure that has real power, but they're not being shared the power by those who are withholding the information. That's all too true to real life. That's how real dictatorships and tyrants cement a power base, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You guys remember when they were trying to? I think were they trying to get to Merlin's lab or something like that, and Ball was with them.
Yes. Camelot.
Yes.
What's that quaint human saying? All flesh, no photo.
The whole Camelot episodes are interesting. And then of course you get to the great old Battle of Supergate, Stargate 12359, call it what you will, which one of the only two really good space battles we actually get to see. Because the car is not bad, you barely see it. Because the issue is you're breaking between a space battle, the ground battle, the battle at the SGC, and between Daniel and Replica. You're breaking it 4 ways. You don't see the battle really. It's kind of jarring.
Late Stargate is very intertwined because when it's there's all these several plot threads running at the same time always, and it's just
Listen, it's the end of season 8. They were trying to tie up literally everything, and so you have 4 different battles going at the same time, plus other events happening.
Yeah,
and so that's fine. It really hypens up the stakes. You get and of course you have the battle with the Ori satellite. Okay, that's a nice little thing. And you have a few aerospace battles.
To kind of what I was saying earlier, how they recycled earlier elements. Toman is this generation's Teal'c. Vala is probably like Shara, though not quite. That's the two are different.
Yeah, to me it was like a
she doesn't
better
get screwed over
version,
quite as hard.
a much better written and well done way of the Harcesis thing.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't have the equivalent of Shara for Vala would be an Ori coming in and possessing her.
Oh
At that point, you deal with an Ori possessed Vala.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there are certain thematic reimaginings, but I mean, the thing is in the end, it's just there's a fundamentally different thing. I don't know. I really like the fact that in the end, is the Ori represent everything that we thought we had handled with the Goa'uld. It's just the Goa'uld pretend to be gods in order to keep loyalty. The Ori literally are literal ascended beings who do not have the same issues that our ascended beings have. I don't know. I always hated the fact, Stargate did a lot of effort, especially with the Ori arc, to describe why the ancients did not interfere, even though it was such blatant, skirting the rules. I don't know. I was so mad half the
To
time.
reference another series, it's the whole ultimate unlimited power corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah,
Which it parallels like the Time Lords from Doctor Who, because the moment they use their power, we hear about the Time Lords going from these great majestic race to, oh my word, you're worse than the Daleks.
No, the thing is with I do accept that they don't want to make a power transfer like the Ori taking advantage of. At the same time, it's like when Anubis is planning to destroy all life in the galaxy, I think that's a good time to interfere because they're not justifying what they do to Alma. It's just they have their ways and people have others, basically.
Well, yeah, it's just like I don't know. Like the fact is, like they literally are creating the situation that allows Anubis to do it. And I know it's to punish like Oma, but at the same time, they're now destroying their own like work as this. Maybe they're like, well, eventually it'll all restart again because that's what we created it to do. But it's like they created this problem. And I know Oma broke the rules, but like their reaction and response is worse.
Yeah, I agree. But
like I think the one problem also is like, what I never understood about the Anubis plot hole, I'd say like not plot hole exactly, but like the exception is like he can only use knowledge he had as a Goa'uld. Well, whoop-de-doo. He still was an ascended being who kind of like, I could only use technology I could have discovered as a Goa'uld. So he's spending the entire time just being like, what can I justify? Because he knows the tech exists. So if he had gotten Thor's brain, like, oh my god, the amount of technology he would have actually been able to do.
How about when they destroyed his fleet? Now he still exists. He cannot be killed, but he has to take new hosts and they just rot their body as he goes from place to place to try and make his way out under their imposed conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the ancients are absolute dicks.
I get the feeling the ancients had the issue of they feel they had that whole no interference, because if we interfere, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. You interfere once, okay, why can't you interfere twice then, or 3 times, or 4 times, or 5 times? Next thing you know, you've turned into a dictatorship and you control everyone.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, the only reason why we have the Anubis issue at all is because they interfered in a way that was even worse than Oma's interference. Like, Oma ascending Anubis because she got tricked is one thing, but sending him back in order to punish her by literally creating the ability for Anubis to destroy all life is kind of another, like, okay, you did this.
The Ascended Ancients, the way they won't interfere and do nothing, it makes me think of the Jedi Masters from KOTOR 2, like, we're not going to do anything against the Mandalorians. Oh, we're just going to let the Sith Triumvirate destroy the galaxy. We're just going to sit here.
Well, it's ideological purity.
We know they won't do absolutely. It's not that they won't do absolutely nothing, because we know it's the ancients who send Daniel back. Because Oma's busy fighting Anubis, Daniel's dead, and they're the ones who send Daniel back to the SGC.
I first thought that when that happened to Daniel, I'm like, oh, he's going to be gone from the show for good. And I was sad.
I mean, he deserved an award for literally just defending the ancient knowledge in his brain, like he did.
He fights and temporarily beats Replicator.
I think Replicator actually had a good point. He's like, the ancients did this to you. They locked away all this knowledge. They took away your ability to truly understand everything. And you wanted to because you couldn't stand the rules, but help me and we will access it all together. And he's just like, no, I honor the rules. I'm honoring the rules set by the ancients. Yes, I will fight you. She's like, okay, we'll fight it out.
But my final thoughts on Ori is
before we get there, what are your thoughts on Supergate, especially given what happens there?
Oh, I love it.
Like the whole
that was some pretty cool stuff.
Because the priors are showing up, yeah, they're fine, really wacky abilities, but the Battleship Gate is the first time we really get to see units of that level. Because you hit season 1, Hot Talk is the end all be all. You hit mid seasons, okay,
but then it becomes cannon fodder.
Yeah, they're one-shotting these things. The Asgard ship isn't doing anything. The Korolev dies. I'll get back to that one in a moment. I have a gripe with that one. For as much as the show likes to treat this international community, every international ship dies.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not an American ship, you're a dead ship. It's like, really?
It carries on to Atlantis too, which is
Yeah,
the
Sun
funny
Tzu.
part.
We don't even get to see the Sun Tzu. It's mentioned. Next thing we hear about it died. Really?
It did the super hive.
It's like, really? But yeah, it's just the Orem other ships are so strong. Poor Chekhov. Chekhov was so great.
They should have made him a
Gary
general by
Chalk.
the end.
I like Gary Chalk. That was just an outrage.
Yeah.
Like, Chekhov just dies. It's like, what? Chekhov,
I
no!
love that. I love that Russian coup episode with him, like where they're talking about like there's a like one of the trusts is in the Russian government, and like I always love that because I'm like that sounds like a really true Russian political drama.
It honestly
the Russian Imperial
does.
episodes make too much sense.
Plus, well, never mind it. It again feels like Animals. In late Animals, that you're trying to start World War III. Oh look, you're the System Wars trying to start World War III.
When we have our own issues, I love how he's just like he's like the real life. Like remember, he like talks about like the reason why he's building up in Ukraine is because of this and blah blah blah. And he's just using it as a cover to do his military thing. I'm like, oh no. Consider IRL like what's happening IRL with that.
But anyway, it's
Yeah.
I think perhaps we should go to Atlantis now because we covered SG1 a bit. And we can always do
Yeah.
a part two.
All right.
Do you want to have
Atlantis.
part 2?
Interesting thing. One of the first times.
Well, hold on.
Remember I talked about earlier how in the Star Wars Insider magazine they would advertise stuff. I remember the first time I saw Atlanta talked about there was like this picture of Taylor, and I was just like, "Who's that chick?"
The tendency for horniness to get you to different parts of this fandom is hilarious.
Yeah, isn't that hilarious?
Okay,
Like,
to
it
be
was-
fair, I did not feel it. When I first saw Taylor, I was 9. Not anywhere near old enough to get that. Now I look at Taylor, it's like, okay, you're probably one of the most attractive girls in the entire show.
Yeah, she's second best female Stargate character in my opinion.
And Jason Momoa, he's so cool. Like, there's a scene where his arm is just clean, just pops it right back in by wedging against.
And you hear like the sound of it going back. He's so badass.
Momoa is such an interesting actor in that show. Ronan's just a lot of the interesting characters, a lot of the really interesting characters in Atlantis get added on after the show starts because
Todd
is like
Wraith, I love him.
Before Todd, we have Michael, who is like such a dynamic character because he is Wraith. But
it was so cool to see Connor Trenier, play a villainous role because I knew Connor Trenier was in the show and I loved him as Trip on Enterprise. Like, he was my favorite character on that show.
You get Michael, and the issue is you look at Michael, and yes, he's Wraith, he's bad. Everything he did is because of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
Atlantis. Every person who dies because of Michael, everything that Michael does is because of Atlantis, because of what Atlantis does to him.
Also, Hermiad is a mood.
Hermiad has such attitude in this season.
My favorite episode, I can definitely say with certainty what my favorite standalone episodes are. In Stargate SG-1, it's a matter of time with the black hole and the relativity. Because it's a natural disaster, and it's one that where there's no enemy fight, it's just physics. And the same thing is true for Stargate's Inferno.
The super volcano.
Yeah, and it's just I've never seen a sci-fi show go with real life physics that way. Not even Star Trek went into that kind of detail where they're dealing with a super volcano. I'm like, I'm sorry, would just be smart science fiction show here, really.
And back to Michael, I did not expect some of this stuff with him. Like, when I thought he'd be on the show, I was like, oh, he'd be part of the regular cast. He'd be one of the good guys. But I'm like, my expectations were subverted.
It's a Wraith.
I still hate that. I still hated the Michael makeup for when he first came back after he the first transition, like when he comes with that hive with the deal. It's like that looks so weird. Oh,
And you know about the Wraith, me and my friend Elliot here agree with this. We think the writers basically looked at the Star Wars expanded universe and they matched,
wrong.
yeah, the Vong with the Anzadi.
Not deliberately, but kind of paralleling.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Well, you know,
maybe
the
some
organic
aspect.
technology, the pale skin, and like the feeding off of others.
Well, I mean, the anxiety feed off your mind, not your body. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
get what
but they
you
got the idea of
mean.
just feeding off of things
Well,
in
not they
general.
didn't get the idea of just inspiration. They
So
feel
okay,
Yeah.
so before
Yeah.
we really go into Atlantis, let's two things first.
yes.
One, dropping back to beginning of season 7, I believe, is when Atlantis is first ever introduced as an SG-1. You know, the Lost City pairs, which lead to Battle of Antarctica.
Yes, yes.
What are your thoughts on how well do you think that like preps you for Atlantis? Because those are the two episodes that end up leading into Atlantis. Is we find the outpost. Everyone thinks, oh wait, Atlantis is in Antarctica, and you find out it's just an outpost, but still. And the introduction of drones. Oh, the most overpowered of weapons in sci-fi.
He
Me
calls
and
them
Elliot,
Squidwards.
we jokingly refer to those as Squidwards.
The drones kill everything.
Yeah,
I have sat in legitimate discussions and talked to people like, cool. So what wins, drones or the Ori laser? Because that's a real discussion.
Those are like some of those powerful weapons in the series. Wow.
They are the two most powerful weapons in the franchise.
well, and then Asgard beam weapons.
Those I've always seen as coming in at third.
Well, I mean, the fact is like, I mean, it's interesting. It's what I mean. I feel like it's different functionality. I mean, we can go on and on about that. I mean, we want to kind of discuss the like transition from SG-1 to Atlantis. So let's not get stuck in the physics of weapons.
How do you guys think the two Lost City episodes transitioned you for Atlantis? Because those are the two episodes where basically Atlantis starts a bit after that.
I kept rewatching the ending battle sequence over and over. It was just so cool. I've never seen something quite like this before, and it was just I love the thing with the president where he stands up to like Anubis. It's like a variation of the Pledge of Allegiance almost. Henry Hayes, President of the United States of America, one nation among many. No more. Bow before your God.
Edward, as someone who works in politics, what are your thoughts on Hayes?
No way he'd get elected. I'm sorry, but it's just like the way Stargate like treats like politics is like absolutely like Kinsey is actually very realistic, but in a very different way. I mean, it's literally what would happen, but like it wouldn't be like the mischievous reasons Kinsey does it. But like he's really realistic. But it's just like people like Hayes is just too good feeling, I would say, comparatively. I mean, in the end, it's just that one, Stargate never really did politics very well. Like I feel like I literally love the original episode where like they shut down the program just because like they're terrified. That sounds like government in a nutshell. It's just like I don't want to deal with it. Like no, but like I don't know. Hayes as a character, I really feel was kind of not really plausible, but I still like the fact that like he was told we need to make it look like we're strong, and he just tries his best.
Basically, speaking of political leaders, what do you think of who's your favorite leader of the Atlantis expedition? Because we had 3, basically.
Samantha Carter.
Huh.
Problem I had with Weir was her ambassadorial experience never really made sense to why she would lead managerially. But
Well,
I mean,
Yeah, and me and Elliot agree on this too. Like, she's better as a diplomat than like when she has to do some military leader stuff.
yeah, I like Carter because she has the experience, and I'm really big into like experience to understand what you're doing. Woolsey is very interesting because like he's like one of the most realistic people I've ever felt like in a bureaucratic role. He feels like people I would have worked with in my time.
Well, it's Robert Picardo. I do like Weir. I just have issues with her. I feel like they took the wrong idea from SG-1, which is she's supposed to be out of her depth and overcompensating, like where she wanted to take a piece of the System Wars land, and she she resorts to saber rattling way too much, and
Actually, I will say, I actually thought that was brilliant because that's literally what, like, the thing was, she was advised by Daniel Jackson
yes,
that she needed to act like what they
yeah,
expected.
but
Because, like, and I found that actually really hilarious. I laughed out loud when she did that,
yeah,
like, when I first watched the episode, because I was like, it literally sounds like what you would do if you were told that you would have to, like, it sounds like a monarchical discussion. And she's probably done that.
She
probably
was told, "Hey, intimidate them," so she tried.
I agree it's realistic, and the fact that I liked it, it's just because then she's shown behind the scenes being uncertain with Daniel. It's like she lacked that kind of confidant in Atlantis, except for Shepard, but she's never really uncertain that way. They try to make her like she resorts to saber rattling way too much, and she's not that well of a diplomat. Like,
I mean,
she's the bargain with the Jedi, and she's just not doing it well to get the
yeah, I mean, I feel like they kind of forgot like her ability. I mean, like the thing is, like IRL, that's very much like what happens. Like a Secretary of State goes into a meeting, will saber rattle, and make high demands. But then what happens is behind the scenes, they kind of talk to their staff, think about what they can do some back channeling to discuss different policies, and then come back and actually do the real stuff. But I feel like they didn't really like transition well.
Yeah, I like Weir. She's my favorite leader, but I think she's better in what's supposed to be the Hammond role, but she was never made for that. So they have a fundamental idea.
I'm gonna talk about Weir. How much did it throw you guys off when you start SG1? You get Weir with the blonde actress who I can't remember her name, and she's there for end of season 5, I believe, end of 5. And then you go beginning of 6, and it's just a different actress.
Yeah, I mean,
I almost completely forgot about that.
I just wish they brought up that it's a hair dye. I would have accepted that, but they didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
they just completely changed
offline about that.
I always just give TV the benefit of just being like, yeah, actors changed. It just happens. I don't know. It's just, I mean, I really dislike a lot of series that like take way too much effort to try to explain why a problem happens. Star Trek does it way too often, where it's like, we need to explain why the original series didn't have facial things. I like how DC is just like, we will not address it. We will just make a comment.
To be honest, I actually do like Enterprise's explanation.
But the thing I just dislike that shows like will go bend over backwards to try to explain a lore continuity issue.
How often does Star Trek say we need an inverse quantum resonance field with harmonic oscillating properties along a string parallel vibration plane or something like that? Subspace, whatever. Well, Stargate goes
quantum particle physics.
Yeah, because Stargate is more in the Occam's razor variety, which is the simplest thing, is what works the best. They need to destroy the cloning facility. They have no more weapons. They couldn't get the bomb in. What do? They have a cruiser. Throw the thing at it and ditch it. It was just so cool.
Yeah, Star Trek does way too much to try to explain the science answers, where Stargate is just like, hey, we are literally modern humans. Blow it up.
Yeah,
even
Star Trek gets into technobabble more so when you hit TNG and everything. TOS doesn't really have that. What are your thoughts on Atlantis? And I'm not referring to the series. I'm referring to the city.
I love the city. It's just
same here. I just love the idea that they are, for their first few seasons, that they are cut off from home, and this is their only resource. Like, this is their base. And
then Voyager couldn't make the concept work well, so Stargate Atlantis just went right back and gave communication with them again, which they were going to try to do. So they're just embracing the continuity instead of running from it. It's the fact that
Edward,
they were.
You groaned.
I mean, I don't know. I like the city and I like the concept. The only problem I have with it in the end is just that it's kind of like the power creep thing we were talking about earlier. The fact that they're literally in the city of the ancients, and they have to come up with like really dumb reasons why they can't just find a ZPM or why it's not a computer, stuff like that. The problem I have with the city fundamentally is the fact that it will always be this MacGuffin that has to be self-limited in order for any show to work. Because that city is too powerful.
If I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, it's just like, oh, we all of a sudden discovered a new room in the city. Oop, there's this technology we can use.
Yeah, and then they had to figure out a reason why to chuck the technology the next episode, or it's going to become too
Yeah.
powerful. That's the problem. Is like
Yeah.
the ship, the city itself is too powerful for the series to exist for
The
too long.
Atero device.
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy.
Yes, it lasts one. It only lasts one episode. Does not have a long term thing, and it's just like that's the problem I have with the city. Fundamentally, it's like it's so cool, and that's why I feel like Atlanta should have been like 3 seasons of just not having communication with Earth, because the only way you can explain why they can't ZPM the city. Just so they, but once they get the ZPM and the shield and stuff like that, it's like they're kind of untouchable for a period.
They already had the Prometheus, and they were gonna, especially once the System Wars fell, they were gonna redouble their efforts to try to get there. They knew the Asgard. They were eventually gonna talk to them, so they have to explain why they're not going there at some point.
Plus, I also I have this like fundamental thing also with the Asgard. Like, what I never understood also is why didn't the Asgard just be like, hey, no, you don't get the city. Like, I'm sorry, but like this city is so powerful that like it needs to be properly explored. And I mean, then there'd be no show. But I mean,
like I said, late Stargate has a bit of a lax continuity issue. Take early on where they're gonna do surgery on Kowalski. They say they need a specialist. A standard doctor just can't do it. Well, wait into the series when they're removing Adria or whatever from Ball or was it Tokra?
Well, yeah,
They're
Sam
removing
she's able
Ball
to
from
do
Azure,
it.
yes.
Yeah, Sam is doing the brain surgery. Why should she know that?
No, the Tok'ra removed Ball from
yeah,
Azure.
they remove.
Yeah, but Sam was there helping. She was handing them tools and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's its own thing. But I mean, it's just like I mean, there's always those issues, and I mean that's the fundamental issue I have with Atlantis. It's just like the power creep is.
I love
much.
power creep. I love power creep.
I don't. I mean, the problem is like there has to be implementation, but at the same time, it's just like the fact is by the end of Atlantis, the Wraith can be dealt with. The threat that could defeat the Ancients is being dealt with by the humans who have like less than what the Ancients had.
Would you have preferred if they did like a season 2 thing where it takes a while for the Daedalus to get there and back, and they're in contact, but it's kind of irregular, basically?
It might have been better, but the thing is, like, once they dumped the DPM on them, it completely changes the nature of the show.
Yeah,
because it means the city is no longer this wonder that they can barely power and they don't have answers to. The fact is like once the ZPM is there, the city is fully like almost fully accessible except for its full capabilities just because they don't have 3.
Yeah, but
that's the problem I have with it. Like the fact is like some of the technology they find in one random episode could have completely changed the entire series, but they kind of have to just like ignore it because otherwise the series is over.
Yeah, but can I bring up something character-wise about Atlantis that I like?
Yeah.
Sure.
You would just never get a character like Rodney McKay.
Yes, I just wanted to bring up Rodney. Like he is even though he has this ego and all that, he's such a likable dweeb.
Yeah, because he's a character who puts on a arrogant front, and he could be a bit of a tool at times, but you get the sense of a guy who does care deep down and who's trying to do the right thing. Like when they're talking about interrogating Kavanaugh, he's the dissenting voice of reason.
Poor Zelensky. I don't know. Zelensky was always just like, I kind of know. Like, I love how deep down Zelensky, as much as like outwardly he hates Rodney, he's always just like, yeah. He's just always like, I'm gonna help him. You know, and like when he was trapped in the thing, he like works day and night to try to help him. Yeah. And I always love how like Rodney always comes back and then just starts like trash talking him again. And Zelensky's like, oh, why do I do it? Why do I bother?
Nowadays they just try and get Rodney canceled over focusing on the negative instead of the positive, which I
mean, modern day would probably happen is Zelenka would probably have like be gay for Rodney at this point.
Oh God, no.
I could see them doing that today if Atlantis.
Like, yeah, it would be hilarious. Like, I just could see it. It's just like the reason why he cares so much. It isn't just because of platonic friendship. It's just because he secretly loves Rodney, and Rodney is just too oblivious to see. Yeah. That's the problem. Is like I feel like that would literally happen today if this story was retold.
And probably because they changed a lot of stuff to fit current narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Weir would probably also be way more overbearing.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I feel like the show in general they couldn't do again today because it taps into a lot of classic ideas about American exceptionalism, being a hero and toppling tyrants, and just stuff that they call it problematic because I don't know.
I mean, also just kind of look like even like at Star Trek's modern thing. They're even including like modern political concepts. How would Stargate function dealing with 4 years later? There's an election that completely changes the oversight of how the SGC or the
Yeah,
Atlantis
I,
expedition works.
I want to bring up something. I know we're not talking about universe, but this is basically something that worries me about the new show, which is what Brad Wright has said about it. He said that he thinks that the secret needs to get out. It's irresponsible after the pandemic and during climate change to not reveal it. And I'm like,
It's like he wants to actually have the pandemic be
they
in
dealt with
the
the Ori
Stargate
pandemic.
universe. Ugh.
They dealt with the Ori pandemic. People are tired of this pandemic, and they're shoving more pandemic down our throats.
The issue with that, and I can see why the issue is climate change isn't really even a thing in Stargate anymore because of the tech they have. They can easily fix it. And the pandemic, because of the technology they have, it is very, very easy to make a cure for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean, the only reason why the Ori pandemic was uncurable is just because it's literally made by Ori technology. It's like like the pandemics of like the other stuff, like
Plus-
our pandemics would never be an issue comparatively.
Plus, I'm just very, very scared that what they're going to do is take it down the SGU approach. I didn't like SGU because it was very bleak and dark and too political, and I don't want to be like the road not taken. If you're going to review the gate program, I think you're going to take away a lot of what made it fun for people, and you're going to make it like early on or SGU, and they should at least set it after they revealed it so that the fallout can settle more evenly. But
Yeah, not about the reveal itself.
I just don't think they're going to be able to help.
I don't even know how you would reveal something like that. Like I gotta say that the probable reaction that most people would get when that gets reported will, considering like especially if they told it in like a modern context, half the population of America wouldn't believe it. Like they would just think that this is some weird government plot to control them.
Well,
Not half, but like
it
probably
would
like
probably
20%.
split into thirds. You'd have a third that doesn't believe it, a third is like, okay, cool, and a third that, depending on which administration is in office, is basically going to rise up and almost cause a civil war because at that
they're going
point,
to
like,
demand
cool.
the gate be
Oh
shut
my.
down. They're going to demand the gate be shut down. It's just like it's like there's going to be a part of the population just so scared.
Well,
of
not
what could be
necessarily
wrong.
shut down so much as because depending on circumstances, I realize no point shutting down. All the bad guys are dead. We have space fleet and everything. The space fleet will cause issues. But it's also the fact that at that point, what else are you hiding?
I mean, also it's just the international thing too. It's just like
It's just
Russia and China will not accept.
Yeah,
and the EU too.
How are they going to portray Russia and China today? Despite being like enemies, it still has that post-Cold War kind of, we're coming together. The war's over. We can be friends.
Yeah, it's like Russia is the greatest ally. China has their own ship. In theory, the Sun Tzu could be repaired.
It's just kind of, it's like
you would not be able to retell Stargate in a modern context because it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's what it sounds like they're trying to do, and it
doesn't work for like the original way Stargate worked. And I mean, let's be like, I feel like the only way Stargate works in the end is literally, like the United States will use the technology they find in the Stargate program to dominate Russia and China at that point. I feel like that's something that would have to happen at that point.
Well, it's also at that point, it's like, cool, you have 304s. The Earth has Odyssey, Daedalus, a Phoenix turned to Hammond, Apollo. That's 4. Yeah, you have 4 304s. China might have 1. While you could reasonably believe a bunch of the states might have F-302s, cool, you have F-302s. In theory, the design for the 303 is also out there to a number of ships. Chekhov does mention Russia has the design for it.
Here's what Brad Wright says about it right there.
Oh, all right, let's see this.
Oh my God! With us being so pissed at China for unleashing this, and for other issues that are just dragging us down, how could you do this? How you cannot do it?
It just does not work.
Well, it's the issue. Stargate rose up into a corner which they jump ship on just before they have to really deal with it. Is the fact that, and they do address this in the books. Actually, the following books for Atlantis. deals with the fact that when Atlantis ends the show back on Earth, the IOA tries to take Atlantis for itself in order to use it as their instrument of basically world domination. They're going to use Atlantis to take over the world and form a world government.
Well, I mean, it's just
At which point, Jack, because Atlantis happens to be within U.S. Territorial waters, basically seizes the city, putting it under directly U.S. control, and basically goes, no, 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 you don't get to do this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing is, like, there's always going to be, I don't know, it's like the UN issue. There's always going to be like, you know, as much as like people, like even globalists who like want to talk about the idea of like, you know, we need to work together, form the UN into a true like world government. What's literally going to happen is just that because the lack of, I would say, like a fundamental agreement on how certain things need to happen in the world. I mean, just the liberal order versus the new authoritarian world that's growing and stuff like that.
Say so. Take something that someone brought up in a review series of Animorphs that I agree with here is to tie back to what we were talking to earlier about how
Pop Arena reviews.
This would just completely unravel our society. Is where do all these alien groups or these other human groups out there stand on something like an issue of gay marriage, something that's like here in our real world that is here, upsets some people like it, and some people are going to repeal it. And it's just, it's like, no matter what you decide or what you think or what you feel, someone out there is going to get upset. And it's just going to cause problems in some way.
I mean, it's the reason why history is full of rising and collapsing orders. Yes. Because there's always disagreement of where it's supposed to go next. And the discovery of aliens is probably it's probably one of the most realistic ways that it would force humanity to unite. But the thing is, like, the world order that would form by a forced uniting of humanity is going to be very different than anyone would think. Because, like, it's going to have to bridge so many different ideological, religious, and all these other divides that society that will form afterwards is unrecognizable.
Because what it feels like is that Rad Right is taking away the wrong lessons from SGU. They lost half of their audience, almost 50%, because it was just too politically charged and it was just too dark. And I think they're just going to repeat that. They even blamed the recession and not the fan backlash. It's just, I think it's just, you know, you guys can, why don't you talk about Universe now? Like we have.
Yes, I was going to say we should get on to that.
I've never watched Universe, so I have nothing to say.
So my first impressions going into Universe was from my friend Elliot here. He told me, you know, he was just not really liking what he was seeing, and he told me how there's like this stupid edginess. So we jokingly refer to it as Stargate Edgyverse.
Well, the thing with it is the fact that you have to keep in mind when this show came out. This show came out at the same time, or started just after BSG came out. Battlestar Galactica.
They were trying to draw in that audience.
Yeah, they were
an older audience.
Exactly.
Away.
Well, it's because you look at Battlestar Galactica. The original show came out in the 70s.
Yeah, it was the late 70s.
Yeah, and that show recently successful. Yeah. I never watched it. I've seen the pilot episode, didn't care for it. But I've seen the new one cover to cover. With missing a couple episodes in there, but I've seen almost the entirety of the new show. It's good. I love it. SGU tries to take that idea and goes, look at how successful this show is. This show came out of nowhere and was amazingly successful. SGU tried to do the same thing. It did not go too well.
Because the problem is you have two like Stargate series that are, you know, has a lot of lighthearted and fun moments, and then you go from that to just like dark. So it's like you're kind of gonna alienate your old fan base by doing that.
What Stargate Universe felt like to me is it felt like Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica fanfic shoehorned into Ron Moore's Voyager fanfiction shoehorned into Battlestar Galactica, adopted by Stargate. That's a three-way.
Maybe I liked SGU. I actually didn't mind it. I saw it maybe a year or two after it came out.
What about
That's
that?
long
What they're
period.
building up to, that girl who had an abortion because of this issue, and I'm just like, who wants this? And it's not just that; I'm only 8 episodes in, and it's just that it's just too. What's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't make sense. If it was a
because of you, I had a negative impression of the show. Now, I do think that the first 9 or 10 episodes or so are just like a slog to get through, but after that,
they are.
it honestly gets better. Like the show started to grow on me.
Well, the first couple episodes it was trying to do, and I actually liked what they tried doing, and I full-heartedly agree. It's something I thought Atlantis really failed on. The whole premise behind Atlantis is you're in a different galaxy. You're supposed to be detached, and yet after season 1, they're all back together. Whoop-de-doo. And your Delos going back and forth. Delos going back and forth, yeah, sure. It's a month each way, but there's still attachments. Then you have Midway. Midway defeats the entire purpose of the galaxy.
I love Midway.
I will say that
I
one
love
mistake
the idea of Midway, but it defeats the purpose of Atlantis. It blowing up, I think, was a really good idea. I really think Atlantis, as Iron said earlier, it being isolated should have been for a longer period of time. SGU really pushed that into
I do
bodies,
agree with that a little bit, but one thing
I don't
have
can I say something? I don't think
I want to say something too. I do somewhat agree with that, but one mistake I do think they did is giving them access to the touchstones to communicate back to Earth and early on. It was just way too early to do that.
It's not like they did anything interesting with them. They just use them for rampant horny sex scenes. And there's a scene where this Colonel Telford is waking up back in his own body, having sex with some dude's wife. Who would want this? Who wanted this? And it's like, and they're talking about the dubious consent with this lesbian girl, and it's like, I know it's the people who were spouting this even back then. It was the divisions today were creeping in. We're talking about the double standards with her, but not this Colonel Telford dude. And I'm like, but why aren't you upset at both? It's just the dubious consent is really creepy. You know, and if you're gonna have it so that that's permissible by contract, put that in the show. They didn't say it once.
And I also do think the idea of, we're lost in space
they're not
way far away from home was done better than Voyager. Because it actually felt like, the ship is falling apart, it's we're struggling with power, food, and all this.
Yeah, but it's why I don't see it as doing the concept of being isolated well, because of those touchstones. It just
other than the touchstone thing,
I actually
better than Voyager.
I actually love the touchstone thing.
Oh, we're never going to see eye to eye.
Well, because the touchstone, because again, this goes back to the natural progression technology. The touchstones have been introduced back in SG1. Because you really see them with it's how you're introduced to the Ori.
No, but they shouldn't get so down and depressed because they have this lifeline for a morale boost back home.
Yeah, the touchstones should have been something that they discover later.
Why?
Because I'd rather have them be cut off from Earth, like no communication back with it,
And then save it for a morale boost. Even Voyager got these morale boosts as time went on. If you're doing a long-running show, you need to have setup like that.
Yeah, but it's the fact that I look at the touchstones and go, yes, you're able to see her home, but you're never going to be there. Voyager, they understood there was a real chance of them getting home. They were on their way home.
Yeah, but
Destiny, they didn't have that. They were going in the opposite direction, and they had they didn't even control their own ship. They had no idea what to do.
Yeah, but
yes, the touchstones to talk to Earth was the only reason they were staying sane.
Yeah, true, but the most that they did with them was just sex pandering, and I hated that.
That's not related to the stones themselves. That's related to how the scripting went. That's not an issue with the stones themselves.
It may not be an issue with it, but it's how they used it. And whatever someone may says, okay, it's a good reason why it failed. It doesn't matter because it still failed. And at least read kind of it.
So the characters, most of the cast, a long while for me to get attached to them because.
I like Eli. I'll admit that.
Oh yeah, Eli. Eli is the best boy. Like he's such a he's
I
so
don't know.
likable.
I kind of
And-
preferred Rush.
And you know, the only other character, at least from the start, that I kind of was interested in was Greer, because I was kind of like, oh, why is he angry? Like,
Oh, the
you know, he's going to be discharged, so I was kind of interested in that. But yeah, I am beginning to really like Dr. Rush too.
Rush.
And when I saw him, I was like, wait, Rumple? Mr. Gold, is that you? Because he played Rumpelstiltskin or Mr. Gold on Once Upon a Time. So I was like, oh, that's him.
He basically has the near intelligence of McKay, but he has the people skills. Because this man used to be a professor at a college. This man used to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't cooped up in some random research lab. He has to talk to people. He used to run a classroom. Rush was so good, and the dynamic between Rush and Colonel Young was always interesting.
Yeah, it was.
The fight at the end of season 1 where Young basically leaves Rush for dead is like, oh, okay, Rush, how are you getting out of this one?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, is he
Mind
going
you,
to be kicked out of
again,
the cast,
I watched
or are
the
we going to
shows
see him
as
again?
they came out. So I watched the end of season 1. Season 2 is not even out yet. Like, they haven't even premiered it yet. And I'm over here sitting, cool. Is Rush just dead?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
And we get to see him back now. He was kidnapped by the aliens. Who those aliens are an interesting group because they know about Destiny. They've been chasing Destiny. They've been after Destiny for quite a
Yeah, the
while.
stuff with the aliens, like when we started getting that stuff, like it was just really getting really good for me.
And the thing is, it sounds like SQ gets a lot better, but boy, was it not worth the trip to get there. At least that's
Season 2 is so much better than season 1.
Yeah.
The one episode I will give us for season 1 that really throws you off. The first couple episodes great, like the as they're trying to get onto the ship, cool.
Okay, yeah.
The episode with where they when you learn how the ship repowers, how it recharges, that episode, honest to goodness, I'm sitting here going, oh, we're about to kill off 90% of the cast. Okay, where are we going from here? And then you realize, oh no, see, we recharge by sun.
That was actually
Hey,
a really breathtaking scene.
It's like,
and also when
okay.
they're flying by the gas giant too. Remember that?
Yes, that whole episode is like very suspenseful. It's like, oh, this is cool. This is really, really cool.
So as we creep up on 3 hours, and something addressed to all of you is probably what are our hopes for the new show? What do we think is going to happen, and what are we likely to see, and how do you think it's going to shape out?
The biggest issue is going to be, okay, are you going to do a continuation of one of the previous shows? Anything set on Earth is going to be basically a de facto continuation of SG-1. Are you going to do an ensemble show, which includes Atlantis, Earth, maybe SGU stuff if you include Destiny?
Because they had a lot of characters.
Are you going somewhere else?
It's why, as much as I hate to say it, I think maybe a reboot will work better. I don't like the idea of the Babylon 5 reboot because it feels like Babylon 5 is being consigned to lost media forever, but at least the idea of it makes sense. It preserves that older Edward left.
Something came up, I think.
Yeah, he...
Okay, but a reboot might work more logically.
Because I know he didn't have anything. I know he didn't have anything to say about SGU because he hasn't seen it.
Okay, so again, he might be back.
Yeah, I just threw a DM. We'll see what happens.
Okay, but this is why I think a reboot works a lot better. I like the idea of rebooting Stargate because it preserves it. I don't like the idea of rebooting Babylon 5 because there's already that slightly dated aspect. And I feel like people just bash Babylon 5. It looks so weird. It's so stupid. And I don't want more of that.
I have never seen Babylon 5. At least not in full. I've seen portions of it. Like when I say portions, I mean like individual clips of some of the battles. I've never sat down and watched the show.
You
Oh,
really
B5 is pretty
should.
good.
You really should see the show.
Yeah, but I just that's the thing is like it's like I think it's better to reboot Stargate because it's just I don't know, maybe time has come and they need to do it for the next generation in a specific way that we won't like. You know,
I mean, I think fundamentally it's also just like what maybe not Hollywood technically, but like what studios look for these days. I don't know. As a big Star Trek fan, to like watch the most recent like Picard and other stuff like that,
I'm not.
I don't know. I highly suspect that it will be a very different show than what any of the fans want.
Yes.
Because they're going to try to universalize it, or they're just going to try to throw in modern stuff to try to make the show.
Here's something I got to bring up. They're owned by parent corporations that are so giant. They're basically monopolies. They're the new monopolies. They're too big to fail. So there's this more of a compromise element with those who are padding your wallets to pay for what you're doing, and that they're less oriented on the fandom and pleasing their target demographic and more on doing whatever they want because they can't fail. So who cares?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the thing. It's like fundamentally, it's going to be a very different thing than any of us probably want or expected.
Yeah.
Because it will take a bunch of nostalgia, but then it will tell these stories that are like, what, like, why? Why are you telling these stories with these
This way.
like social ways? And they'll throw in social commentary in modern time. You know, I can already imagine because like they've done it like in Star Trek now. It's just like they're gonna throw in these like things all the time. And like the fact that like Picard deals with going back to 2020 and like dealing with ice for some reason because they disagree.
It's so stupid to say that January 6th is one of the worst incidents in human history. When you look at the Red Army mass rape, the Holocaust, Jackson's Trail of Tears, famines, people trading body parts for meat,
the collapse of
put down and.
I mean, just look at the collapse of the Roman Empire. You could even say it's far greater. Like that's a far greater thing than January.
Oh boy,
6th.
yes.
We're just so spoiled and indignant and arrogant and selfish in the modern era.
Strange New World. I have the new Star Trek show. I haven't watched it. I've heard a lot of mixed feelings, but like I know there's a YouTuber I watch.
Guinan is not herself.
Guinan. There's a YouTuber I watch who is very critical of a lot of the new media and everything. And even he's admitted some of the episodes in Strange New World have actually been, pretty good.
I actually saw the first 2 episodes because I went to my uncle's place while my grandma was doing something, and I did watch the first 2 episodes, and I liked it from what I saw.
Are you talking about the David Cullen show?
No, the most recent Star Trek show.
Yeah. No, I was saying your reviewer that you watch.
No.
I don't know. There's a lot of different shows.
I'll tell you later.
Something with the Picard show that I hate, just from how it sounds, is they go to Guinan, who's in the early 24th century, the 2020s, and we know she was there at the late 19th century, the height of colonialism, where it was declining in its late heyday, but it was still around. And she was interacting with Mark Twain and having no issues. I know he wrote a bunch of N-bombs in his book, but just roll with it. And now in early 21st century, you're going to do this stuff where she's so upset about social issues here. How about social issues in the late 19th century, where it's just 20 years after literal slavery ended, and you're getting so upset about ICE? What?
Yeah, I mean it's what happens when modern sensibilities change. Like, I don't know. I always liked that like Gene Roddenberry, like he had issues with like how militarized they turned Starfleet, but like in the end, Gene Roddenberry wanted to show a better world by not addressing the modern issues.
Yeah, because
if he did tell something, he would do it with allegory and nuance,
or in the future, because the problems of today are not simple, they're not easy, they're very complicated, and they're hard to solve. I could name the big bun issue that just got undone, abortion. I'm not going to take a side either way, but I could ask people here, and everyone's opinion would be different. And you see what I mean? These are not easy questions. They're not easy to solve, and they're hard to consider because of our very fluid nature as rational, sapient beings.
No, you could even say that Star Trek was pro-life in The Next Generation for the sheer fact they're like, remember, they were in the episode with Troy getting kind of like that alien baby.
Oh,
And then the
Oh, yeah,
first
she
thing,
gets impregnated.
and the first thing is literally all of them like, take it out, kill it. And she's like, no, I want to take care of this baby. Even
or
though
how
you know
about
what
the
my force
episode
up
with
on me.
how about the Irish episode of these chickens and these clones?
Yes.
Riker
Well,
guns
you also
down.
have the whole
Ooh,
episode
that's
with
pro-choice.
you have the court case episode with Data,
Oh my
where
gosh.
Oh, I was just gonna bring
is
that episode
Data
up.
Measure of
Too.
the
actually
Man.
sentient?
Yeah, but you could swing it both ways. That based on the Troy episode, Star Trek is pro-life, or maybe on the Riker episode with the Irish, he's pro-choice. You see what I mean? You could go either way. Either way.
Yeah, because like the clones, it was kind of like the same case with the Asgard. They were clones of clones and clones of clones, and the DNA was so degraded that they needed like.
And Riker guns down his own clone. This is
Yeah.
why I think Star Trek was better in season 3 because the allegory didn't work. It's a potentially interesting idea, but they didn't capitalize on it well. So it comes off like Riker is killing his own clone, even though, as Odo says later on, killing your clone is still murder. Oh, God.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's I feel like sci-fi is the thing that makes sci-fi unique is the fact that it deals with modern issues without addressing modern issues in a new setting. And it discusses the idea of like, utopian sci-fi has always been really good at the idea of like, how about we solve the problem by just dealing with it? I don't know. I always kind of go back to the idea that like how Star Trek maybe like I had this psychology class once. We had this interesting discussion about it. Like, did Star Trek do more for young people by just casting a black captain and a woman captain, and just psychologically the kids who grew up watching that were just more normalized because it just didn't address the issue compared to the idea that because in modern day you'd point out that they casted a black person.
I love
the role.
and they didn't make a big deal about it. They did sometimes, but even an episode with the prophets, that's like them telling him things could be worse. You could be back a few centuries ago and you'd not them out for nothing. And it's like there's a reason we don't have much good sci-fi these days. It's because the idea of corporatism and big monopolization smothers art, and it's antithetical to rational thinking science fiction.
So
It's why after the Cold War we had such a brief Renaissance period for like the next 20 years, and now it's just over with.
Yeah. So quickly talk about corporatism. Anyone remember the corporatism episode Stargate when Ball shows up as the new CEO of the leading defense contractor for the U.S. government?
Oh my gosh!
Oh boy!
It's a funny episode. It's like, he's a Sith Lord. We know he's a Sith Lord, but we can't touch him because he's a public figure. And they're just sitting here just wanting to shoot something because they can't touch Ball, and he's out in the public. It's the greatest thing ever. And who gets him? The Jaffa.
Yeah, I just miss that nuance we used to have with storytelling. Like, if the Babylon 5 reboot, if that ever comes to fruition, they're gonna have the Earth, the Earth Alliance becoming a dictator. They're gonna have someone in power, whoever's in power. The reboot version of President Kark, they're gonna have him say, "Make the Earth great again."
And what he's gonna do is we're gonna make the Earth Alliance so great, so great. It's gonna be huge, folks. I'm telling you, real huge. You're gonna see something.
And it's gonna be
like
so blatant and just in your face that it just makes you roll your eyes.
Because Babylon 5, one of the greatest things I feel like Babylon 5 did is it explored the idea that it's quiet. Coups are these the subversion of society is this long process that starts with these mini steps. Like, I don't know. And that's why I feel like modern storytelling could never tell that story. Because I remember when I first watched Babylon 5 and they eventually reached this point. And I'm sorry, G-Man, it's a bit spoilery for you because you haven't watched it. But like, the fact is just that when we find out that President Clark killed Santiago to take power and stuff like that, and do like all this other stuff, like, it's a slow process that we were like, we could have seen every step in hindsight. We see what happened that created the situation.
Yeah, there was a lot of really great foreshadowing.
But there's nothing we can do now. It's too late. We like the instruments of democracy failed to prevent it.
Yeah, it's something I would say in a similar vein. For any new Stargate show, is they really need to stay away from Earth and focus more on the big out there. Something new, just not something that's Earth centric. Because even for Stargate, I feel like a lot of the Earth episodes were kind of meh, with exceptions. There were a few good ones here and there, but the Earth episodes aren't what made it very memorable, I think.
Well, as I said earlier, when Everest Mutant and dropped off a moment, is the fact that it really what I'm going to think about is really going to depend on my thoughts on the show. Are you continuing SG1, SGA, SGU? Are you going somewhere else? Are you doing an ensemble show of like a mix of everything?
They were going to do that in one of the movies. They were going to have
had things had gone better financially, they would have done a Stargate TV movie where all three crews or cast, the main cast of all the three shows would have interacted.
Plus, look at it this way. Look at the market these days. Sci-fi episodes per season runtime back in the day went up to 20 per season, 20 episodes. These days they're cut in half to 10, 13 at best. Even something like the Mandalorian, which gets huge praise, is just like, what is it, 7 or 8 or 9 episodes? That's not a lot. And it's like they have very little that they work with, and they're blowing through money. On the Kenobi show, they spent apparently $25 million per episode. That's $150. When you look at like a classic show, they made a lot more with a lot less, and they had to earn it. And they just have all these tools that they come in and inherit that they didn't earn for themselves, so they didn't have to earn any of the responsibility for it. And now I'm channeling Ian Malcolm. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fundamentally, it's just like, unfortunately, as modern media knows that they don't have to make everything good to survive compared to old sci-fi, because old sci-fi had to like succeed in an element that allowed it to continue as a show. Where modern sci-fi, a lot of the time, they can literally just coast on nostalgia alone, even if the movies themselves are bad. The fact, like the new Star Wars movies are a great example. Like, everyone, like, a ton of people are like, "Oh, these movies are so bad," but they went and saw them, and they still made a ton of money for Disney.
This is why I tune out all modern media from my life, whether it's news or entertainment. I look to the past. I want to embrace it back to that time when it was better. I mean, Iron here is a big music buff, and you just look at the tunes from the before the 2000s and the 21st century. They're just so much better music. Synthwave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's almost to the point where it's kind of like, oh yeah, us fans can come up with better stories.
Yeah, because
Like, I don't know.
Like, I have a lot of really interesting ideas, like story ideas for Star Wars, but it's set in their new canon. It's just like, they should probe my brain and take those stories, beat by beat, and make them.
We've been doing this for 3 hours now. Do you think we should just do a part 2 eventually and go over what we missed? Because
yes, because we skipped a lot of fun Atlantis.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
Because we briefly talked Atlantis and then just skipped over. Like, we didn't talk about the Wraith at all. We didn't talk about any of the characters besides McKay and Lear.
I mean, the problem is like we're dealing with the fact that like SG1 is such a huge beast of its own because it's 10 seasons, even longer than Atlantis, that it's hard to deal with.
And like, we didn't talk about either of the 2 movies.
Yeah, something I wanted to talk about was asking what's your favorite comedy episodes, but we didn't get time to get to that because there's a lot you could choose. And
I need to see a list of those. I don't remember any.
Yeah, same here. I'm
200.
trying to think about which ones, but I have to sit down and think about that. Yeah.
It's something we could probably do at a later date, which is part 2.
Yeah.
So I guess. What do you guys think about that?
Part 2 is fine. Yeah, I'm free all week.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll be free next Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll convene sometime in the future and talk more Stargate, what we missed, and all that.
Let me see. Yeah, I'll be here next weekend.
Okay, so it sounds like Saturday is part 2 then, I guess.
Yeah. So, as for closing thoughts.
Oh, yep.
I am not the person who should go first for this.
Yes.
I mean,
so Stargate is, I'm glad my friend here introduced me to that, because, especially with the state of a lot of like modern franchises like Star Wars or Star Trek,
Yeah.
it's go to the past to find a good alternative.
It's like, yeah. Mhm.
And I wish that we would have gotten season 3 of Universe.
I wish Joe Flanagan's attempted purchase with that French Canadian
Tried.
company to buy season 6 of Atlantis would
He
work.
was so
Oh
close.
yes, he was so close to that.
And he got screwed over because the new owners would rather be working with Dean Devlin or Rowan Emmerich, and so much for that. What are your closing thoughts, though, on this, Edward?
I mean, Stargate is one of those shows that was it comes from like that silver age of sci-fi where like we got so many different things, like this prime era that allowed for different storytelling, new universes to like expand in new ways and like last. And like we kind of forget, while Trek together is longer when you add all the series, Stargate is the longest running sci-fi series that existed. 10 seasons is the longest one. Every Star Trek show ended at 7 seasons.
Yeah.
The thing
With
is,
the
like,
exception of costs, the animated series and Enterprise, of course.
Yeah, but none of them lasted longer than 7 seasons.
That's what I said.
Yes,
Lasted longer. I didn't say that they all were. Anyways, the fundamental like changes that Stargate did to a massive part of the sci-fi time is very impressive, and we got to see such a developed universe because it lasted for so long. Fortunately, it got cut short because modern sensibilities were changing, and like the view of sci-fi became far less utopian to more gritty. But I think fundamentally we see a very fantastic sci-fi series that left its real mark for a lot of people, and the fact is it's still to this day because they still do conventions and sell products. It's just like, yeah, but unfortunately I don't think any remake will ever like get the same majesty as the old one, but we can definitely still look back at the old ones and be very impressed of what they gave us even back then.
Yeah.
For my closing thought, it's a big hell of a trip, and anyone who's been listening should probably just start to go watching it right now. Why are you listening to me for? It's just it's good. See it for yourself. And I actually such a huge nerd. I actually bought overseas some of the ship models I have because I love the fleet action. I love the intersection. It feels like it's something out of Halo or Star Trek. And
Ship models?
Daedalus and the Prometheus, and it's a long-lasting thing that I don't know what they're going to do with it today, but I feel like at least the old stuff, with the exception of Universe and Atlantis, wrapped up its plot threads and ended on a satisfying note. At least it's just a good place to end it, probably.
Yeah. As for mine, it's like, yeah, growing up with Stargate. Apparently, I guess the four of us, I'm the one who saw it first, being 2005-ish. All the sci-fi shows I watched, probably the only one I ever saw as early as Star Wars. Star Trek came later. BSG, I was probably 14 when I saw it. Yeah, so the only comparable I have for it was Star Wars growing up, and it was Stargate. Star Wars, you always have that fantastical element. This is effectively a different universe. Stargate was the here and now. Stargate felt like now. These are uniforms you could see. I had an uncle in the military. I saw him in civilian uniforms carrying the exact same gun. Well, depending on what I show you. It felt very real to me. It felt very interesting. It felt very, very down to earth, especially at the beginning. As things progressed, looking back at the show, I see so many more issues that I did when I was growing up. As a kid watching it, it's so surreal. You don't think about it. It's just amazing. As an adult,
I hope
there's issues I find with it, but I still love the show.
Because they had military advisors and they had people telling them how the military would behave. So it feels like something that's really out of...
SGA was great. I loved SGA. Probably could have gone with another season, but it was fine. It still wrapped up well. SGU was robbed. Needed another season, probably 2.
Be better, scrub.
Oh, yes.
Because did any of you guys finish SGU?
I have just a few. a few more episodes left
Okay,
to
so
watch.
you know what I'm talking about with the whole drone arc. The drone arc gets snubbed so hard because it ends on a cliffhanger that demands another season. It technically wraps up. It demands another season. Eli deserves justice. When you finish the show, you will realize what exactly I'm talking about. Eli
My
deserves
boy, my boy, Eli.
They should probably finish it sometime before like next Saturday.
You finish the show, you will realize what I'm talking about. Eli deserves justice for what happens to him at the end of the show.
Yeah.
Okay, not justice, but the show ends in a way that's very precarious for Eli. Everyone else is safe. Eli is like very precarious.
So
It needs another. If it had another season, I think SG would have hit the ground and really gotten going.
yeah.
Back
So
half of the show was amazing.
so is
Yeah.
that it? Do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I can end the recording stream right now. Well,
Okay. So
hopefully
you
we'll
sometime
see
next
y'all in a week and we'll finish loose ends.
And time.